You're pretty good about watching them, right?
Simply pay the week stuff. If you guys want to give me your shoes, I'll bring them. Shut. Yeah, that's right. You were in the military. How long did it take you to get your shoes really? It took a long time. Seriously.
Did you ever think to go down the dark alley in Warren, Mexico?
You know, as much time as, as many times as I went down to Mexico, I wasn't like, let's go down this alley and see if I can get my boots done.
That must be.
Did they have good signage? Was there a sign that said, hey?
A little flashing sign.
No, it wasn't that easy. I don't know. I know. I'm going to bring them. And you guys are going to go.
Are you good?
Yeah, it's gone.
We're all set. We still have a couple of questions.
Okay. Hey, shoe shine? Shine?
A nice glow on.
Yeah. I'm still struggling.
According to the Swiss, we have 45 seconds.
It's out to where I was guessing.
Oh, what a shock. You didn't think they wouldn't do that? Oh.
Thank goodness for a light.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe if we just drive on,
It's like 2 hours.
Oh, yeah.
We can talk about shoes. Maybe they'll be orders.
Call to order this regular meeting of the Monument Board of Trustees, the 5th day, February 2018. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Hogan, would you please take roll?
Mayor Kaiser, noted absent. Trustee Bornstein?
Yes.
Trustee Kubin?
Here.
Trustee Elliott?
Here.
Trustee Medlicott?
Here.
Trustee Murphy?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilson?
Here. Before us we have a agenda and a consent agenda. Do we have any amendments or motions?
I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda to include an executive session pursuant to CRS 24-6-402 4BF for the purpose of discussing a personnel matter involving our town manager.
Second.
Ms. Hogan, will you take roll?
Trustee Bornstein?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Medlicott?
Yes.
Trustee Elliott?
Yes.
Trustee Kubin?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilson?
Yes. That motion passed 6-0. First item on the agenda is ordinance number 0320.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, motion to approve the consent.
Oh, I'm sorry.
As amended.
As amended.
Motion to approve as amended.
Second.
Trustee Bornstein?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Medlicott?
Yes.
Trustee Elliott?
Yes.
Trustee Kubin?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilson?
Yes. Now to ordinance number 032018, an ordinance approving a rezoning and final plat for Eagle View patio homes. Ms. Jones.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the board. This was originally project DA 14-2017, ordinance number 3. So a quick map to set the stage of the property that we're talking about on this first item tonight. The square green roof at the top of your screen is actually the building we're in right now. That's Town Hall. So this is just a little further south of Beacon Light Road, that vacant property on the west side. As you can see, it's surrounded by single-family homes. There's a attached single-family home to the south, vacant land to the east. So summary of the proposal tonight. It's currently one lot. It is platted. It's 0.66 acres, so it's quite large. It's currently zoned R1, and that R1 zoning on that property would actually only allow one single-family home, one single-family detached home. So the proposal is actually to subdivide that lot into 4 lots. They would be approximately, the smallest one's approximately 6,500 square feet, and they do go a bit larger. And rezone it to R3. That R3 zoning would allow for 4 single-family attached homes on the site. So each home would be on its own lot. Quickly, a look at the zoning map. As I mentioned, it is zoned R1. It's actually surrounded by a couple zonings. C1 across Beacon Light, PCD to the diagonal, which is a planned commercial development, and then business further to the north, like I said, the property we're on right now. This is the original plat. I know it's very hard to see. We'll just look at it very briefly. The property is highlighted in green. It was originally platted back in 1978. Those parcels along Beacon Light were all referred to as parcels with lot numbers, which is unusual. It's parcel C, lot 2, and then the other actual lots to the left, to the west, are all developed with single-family homes. So this is as is currently platted. Like I said, it's just one lot, approximately 0.66 acres, and then the proposal is to simply divide that into 4 lots. So sort of a summary of this. Like I said, I know those plots are very hard to see on the screens. Anything other than one single-family home with this current zoning would require a rezoning before you tonight. So, 2 attached homes, anything else would require a rezoning. One single-family home, that would be a very large lot, especially in that neighborhood. It's a little bit awkward the way it's bounded by roads on 3 sides. That's somewhat unusual. So the proposal, we do believe, is compatible with the neighborhood. It's consistent with the principles in the comprehensive plan, and it does meet all the plat requirements in our subdivision ordinance, chapter 16. And then just a brief talk about infill. This type of one vacant lot in the middle of a developed area, in planning terms anyway, we sort of refer to it as infill. It's very desirable because the services are there, right? There's water lines, there's sewer lines, all of that type of thing. So it's really the most efficient way to grow. And so for that reason, this type of infill we certainly recommend and are in favor of. And it's housing near our downtown. We don't see a lot, at least we haven't in the recent past on this side of town. And so it's exciting to see some possibly new housing over on this side, which can take advantage of the amenities over on this side, right? Town Hall. We have a lot of commercial amenities, and you can certainly walk to downtown and the amenities that are in that area. One quick extra issue for you tonight. This was not brought to the Planning Commission because this is a board issue. The water for this project, because it was currently platted as one lot to be 4 lots, they are just slightly short of their demand based on just traditional single SFEs, right, single family equivalent demand. The town certainly has adequate supply to fulfill that need. They simply has to be paid for or bought, right, to cover that. It's just over 1 acre-foot. There is a resolution in place from 2007 which authorizes the board to give a discounted rate specifically to properties in the downtown area. There was a map. It's very hard to read, but this particular lot is included in the defined area that's eligible for these types of discounts. It was used on the Bethesda Gardens Senior Living Project, which is right just south of 2nd and Beacon Light. In that instance, back in 2007, they granted a discount down to $1 per acre-foot because it was deemed, again, as desirable. The current applicants are asking simply for a 50% reduction. The current standard fee is $10,000 per acre-foot. They're requesting making the request to the board if that could be reduced 50%, which would be $5,000 per acre foot. Everything we've talked about, including this issue of the water, is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Like I said, there's specifically wanted to highlight one land use policy, which says promote infill development on vacant land with attention to the vacant or underutilized land in and around the downtown core. So it certainly seems like that is applicable in this instance. The Planning Commission did recommend approval of this project based on the findings that it meets the standards and criteria for approval. Quite quick, but staff is available to answer any questions.
Questions from the board?
I just had a couple of questions too. What has the feedback been from the neighbors? Number one.
There were, I believe, 2 folks that spoke at the Planning Commission meeting. They were not opposed, they simply had some questions about what it would be.
Okay.
And so we sort of discussed that. Now at this time with the rezoning and the plat, we don't have, the applicant doesn't have an exact rendering to show you. That's simply not required at this stage. I will clarify one other thing that came up at the Planning Commission. The R3 zoning, it does allow more, right, than single family attached, which is what your applicant is proposing. However, based on the lot sizes that they are proposing, that is all that would be allowed. There are additional lot area requirements for more units. So that's all that would be allowed on there, even though it does have that R3 zoning. I would call it a just a missing link in the code that single family attached is not addressed anywhere specifically. So that's why there's sort of this leap from R1 to R3 is to allow that. But again, there's a little bit of a caveat there based on the lot size.
Thank you. And my second question regarding the water, the state right now is in a moderate drought. Obviously, we're looking for resolutions to our aquifers. Why would we be discounting on a development with four homes?
We simply wanted to point out that the board does have that authority based on that previous resolution, and I do think from a planning perspective, this type of infill development is very efficient. And it seems like that was put in place for this type of downtown growth specifically. It's basically because my understanding is the way that was platted in the past versus the process is now. I think the way that those are evaluated is a bit differently. Certainly, again, that's based on standard SFE calculations. These may use less than that. I know from my conversations with the applicant, they're looking to do very low maintenance yards and that type of thing. They certainly may want to speak further about why they think you should grant that. We're simply bringing it up as an option.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the board for Ms. Jones?
I have a question. So the 4 attached homes that would go in, is that like a townhouse complex? Is that what we're talking eventually?
I think there's various terms for it. My understanding, and the applicant may want to speak to this further, they're referring to them as patio homes because their plan is for them to be ranch style, single story. In some terms, townhome would mean 2 stories. So, but they attached, and then the plan, if I can go back to a map real quick. Oh, that's okay. 2 of them would front on, nothing would front onto Beacon Light. It would be 2 fronting onto Buttonwood Court and 2 onto Buttonwood Place. So they would just be the 2 attached. But the patio homes is sort of the term that the applicant has designated for this.
Okay, I understand. So in regards to the lot size and just the concept of patio homes, what kind of square footage are we talking as far as each home? Has there been any discussion around that?
It hasn't been determined. They certainly haven't submitted anything to us on that level. I think we've had some casual discussions and they mentioned it at the Planning Commission, so I'm sure that they would be happy to let you know more sort of what they're envisioning when they speak. Okay.
Does the applicant have a presentation?
I think they would like to speak. Yeah. Briefly and answer your question.
Sign in here, I guess.
You don't need to sign in. That's
okay.
public comment.
I'm Darwin Anderson from Eagle Build Construction. I do a lot of infill lots around and things like that. And I've been building here since 1969. I probably look too young. We just thought that this project would be a nice asset to the downtown area, and we're kind of gearing it for senior living. We've already had inquiries from people who want to buy it that have lost their spouse and want to downsize and stuff. They'll be like 1,250 square foot units, and it's close to all the schools and everything they need around, and still have a small downtown living rather than being in a big jungle of patio homes. And like we were going to gear them for zero landscaping, so there wouldn't be much landscaping or taken care of, and they're just zero lot lines where there's two units, but they're separated by single lots, zero lots, clearance lots. So we just thought it worked good for that, and even maybe some professional people. But that's all that we have. And the center of the lot has a big easement through it, which makes it hard to do one unit on, with gas lines and everything running through it. So that's about all I have to say, I guess. I think it will be an asset to the community and a nice place for senior living or so, because they got the restaurants and the cafes and medical down close and nice downtown. It's still a small town living, but they're still in kind of big occupied place. But we just thought it worked good for that.
Any questions from the board for the applicant? Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
This is a public hearing, so I will now open it up to public comment. Would anyone from the public like to speak against this rezoning? Seeing none, would anybody like to speak for this? None there. I'll bring it back to the board for further discussion or approval. One question, we are just approving the rezoning, correct? Not the...
Rezoning and a final plat?
Right. We're not addressing water at this time? Or is that part of the ordinance?
Yes, we would also like to ask the board to make that decision tonight as well. You could do it as a condition of approval if you were granting a discount of some type.
Okay. Board discussion or motion?
Is there any way to go back and revisit the water at a later point? If we were to pass without that discount, and then upon further review decide if we wish to do that in the future? Would that be something we could revisit and
That's a great question.
extend that discount?
When is the fee paid?
It's not paid until the time of land use permit issuance, which would be when they're ready to get their building permits. So I would think there would be a little bit of time between now and then, but I don't know
Procedurally how you would bring that back before
Right.
the board.
Right.
For your consideration.
But certainly, I don't know.
The ordinance right now doesn't read anything about water as far as granting any sort of approval, the way it's written right now.
That's correct.
I think just a comment, again, I think the development is good for the community, and I like hearing about retirees and downsizing, but with the current water situations, and we have a little time to see if maybe we do get some water and what happens, but maybe it can be put off for a little while so we can assess.
I'll bring up an additional point that Trustee Elliott just made. If we're by ordinance, approving or denying a particular rezoning and plat, we would at some point have to address formally a discount extended for the water rights. So how would that come about?
A discount for what, I'm sorry?
For the water rights, or a fee in lieu of?
Well, you set the fee in lieu of when a project is water short. So I believe they're saying this project is 1 acre foot short.
Right, and what Trustee Elliott said is that's not included or mentioned or referenced in the ordinance as written for us to approve on tonight.
They will have to pay $10,000 unless you add as a condition to this ordinance that you want to reduce the fee, because you have set the fee already. So if that's something you want to do, you'll have to add that as a condition, or vote on it as is, and then they would have to pay the $10,000 for the 1 acre foot that they're short.
Would they have the ability to come back prior to submitting and seeing what's happening within the community and the water and what have you? was not decided upon tonight.
I don't know procedurally how we would bring that back before you. You said at the time of
Land use permit issuance.
we make them pay the fee.
Mm-hmm. I think staff's opinion on the way the ordinance was written was that we could amend the ordinance through a condition if the board so desired.
So it would be better to do it now.
Thank you.
Given that it would be better to do it now, if we don't want to do it now.
You vote for it as is, and I could maybe figure something out in the meantime.
Yeah.
If that's your inclination, we can explore that.
Yeah, it would seem to me, if I were the applicant, I realize they'd like to save $5,000. But it would be better to get an approval, if they can, tonight with a vote of the board, and then deal with this issue of the 5 or 10 grand at a later point, before the land, the building permit is done, is applied for. Anyway, that's how I feel.
I'd like to make a motion to approve, not as presented, with the full water rate in place at this time. Ordinance number 03-2018, ordinance approving rezoning and final plat for Eagleview Patio Homes.
Second.
Ms. Hogan?
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Bornstein?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Bedlicott?
Yes.
Trustee Koopman?
Yes.
Trustee Elliott?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Next, we have ordinance number 04-2018, an ordinance approving a sketch plan amendment to the Monument Ridge Plan Development. Ms. Jones.
Good evening again. Can you say that one more time tonight? Okay. Sketch plan amendment for the Monument Ridge Plan Development, project 2017. Ordinance number 4. This probably looks familiar, and I will highlight that in just a moment. So the property that we're speaking of is the Monument Ridge Plan Development, which is located at the southeast corner of Baptist Road and Struthers Road. If you see on this aerial, the King Supers is located to the north across Baptist Road, just to give you some perspective. That area currently includes the Fairfield Inn, a Walgreens, McDonald's, Chase Bank, those types of things. As I mentioned, this is familiar because you've heard something similar not too long ago. There was a similar request back in 2017. It was actually heard before this board in October. At that time, the applicant was requesting an amendment to the sketch plan to allow for multifamily with a density of 20 to 24 dwelling units per acre. This board voted 3-3 on that project. So they are back tonight with a revised density, everything else essentially being the same. So their requested amendment would allow for multifamily development at a density of 16 to 20 dwelling units per acre. There was a little bit of talk at the last couple of hearings about the vistas, right? The current multifamily living that's located up on Jackson Creek Parkway. The maximum density in that area is actually 20 dwelling units per acre. And if you work out both densities, it works out to approximately 17 units. So the new proposal is exactly in line with what is allowed at the vistas, just as a side note. So a little bit of a summary of this project. There was an original sketch plan approved back in 2005. This includes 4 lots that are a part of that sketch plan. 5C was originally commercial, 10A, 10B, and 10C were allowed, designated as multifamily at a density of 10 to 12 dwelling units per acre. There were some later revisions through a different process that changed those to commercial. And then the current proposal, as I mentioned, would change all 4 of those lots to allow multifamily at 16 to 20 dwelling units per acre. Again, this is planned development zoning. It's not changing the zoning, it's simply changing the designated uses. This entire area is vacant. And just as a reminder, The sketch plan just sets out the uses. Further plans would come back before this board, a preliminary and/or a final PD site plan, which is where we would get into the specifics. So I won't have any specifics for you tonight. I don't believe the applicant will either in terms of, you know, building height and architecture and that type of thing. We simply don't have that at this stage. This is just trying to set those land uses. So this is back to that 2005 approved sketch plan that I mentioned. The area in question is highlighted in green, or the area that we're discussing. That single lot to the north was originally commercial retail, and then the remainder, lot 10A, 10B, and 10C, were designated for multifamily 10 to 12 dwelling units per acre. That was approved 2005. So the current proposed sketch plan, and again, the blue highlighting is just the overall entire area, but we're speaking specifically about the area highlighted in green. It's about 9.88 acres. So this is the area that they are proposing for that amendment to allow multifamily at this density. This was heard before the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission was not in favor of this project, and they did recommend denial. There is some discussion of what went on in that Planning Commission in your Planning Commission report. Certainly I can answer any questions about that or any other questions that you may have for staff.
Questions from the board?
Okay. Go ahead.
Yes, are these multifamily, are these apartment homes or are they actually condos or townhouses for sale?
I don't know that that has been officially determined, although I think it would be somewhat unusual to be able to do townhomes at that density. But again, there's no review of sort of the layout or what they would look like. But I'm going to go out on a limb and I'll let the applicant further address that. I think that would be more of a typical apartment. But again, this is sort of just setting that density that would be allowed.
It's an important question because a couple board meetings we've had discussions and planning meetings about workforce housing and
right.
providing places for people to actually get into the housing market here and work in the town and be able to afford, you know, a condo or something,
sure.
or their first home.
Sure.
So there's a big difference between apartments and.
Right. So in other words, is it rented or is it
exactly.
Is it bought? I'll defer to the applicant. I don't know the answer to that. Exactly what their plan is.
Other questions?
Absolutely. So this was previously zoned specifically residential and now it's zoned commercial, is that correct?
Well, I don't want to use the word zone because it's always been zoned plan development, but the land use designations on the sketch plan were originally multifamily 10 to 12 dwelling units per acre. Then there were some PD site plans that were done that designated it as commercial. So now they're wanting to come back to the multifamily but at a slightly higher density.
So it was changed to commercial when?
Right. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy in our town records, to be very honest with you. The sketch plan was in 2005. To our knowledge, there were not any amendments to the sketch plan, but there were some subsequent preliminary PD site plans that were approved. I don't have the exact year for you, unfortunately, off the top of my head. And so in our review of this project and discussions with the attorney and that type of thing, it seems like the most appropriate route would be amend the sketch plan. Because if we brought you a PD site plan, we would review it against the sketch plan. Now, obviously, I wasn't here when those previous PD site plans were done. They certainly went through the process and they did designate it as commercial. But it was, I think, was a slightly different process at that time.
And the point that I'm getting at is it was specifically redesignated or classified specifically for the commercial that we see there today to make way for the businesses that we see there today? Is it?
Oh no, the particular area that we're speaking of still remains vacant.
Okay.
So the other remaining area, I'm sorry, Laura, may I bring it back up? I see your question now. I'm
okay,
sorry.
thank you.
Okay, so this was the original sketch plan from 2005. So only the area designated in green is what we're discussing. The other area was always designated as commercial.
Gotcha.
And it's in the other areas that you have existing businesses.
Okay.
So the entire area that we're discussing is still vacant. So nothing has gone in there with the previous multifamily or with the commercial.
Just the red one though, the red area was probably, they anticipated some sort of commercial.
It was
going there at
originally
some point.
commercial. Mhm.
Okay. In the packet that we received here with this particular ordinance, there's reference made to the comprehensive plan. Quote, future land use plan provides an opportunity to move from single-use developments to a mix of complementary land uses. My question would be, how does this, educate me, how does this change specifically meet that criteria, or that opportunity criteria?
I believe there's certainly some.
Sorry.
There's oftentimes a desire to have, and I think the comprehensive plan speaks about multifamily near commercial, near employment, right, near amenities, that type of thing. As you know, there's the property to the south of this is actually all in the county. That is single family. It sort of serves as a transition between single family homes and then the fairly intense commercial development up on the north side. I think from a planning perspective, you can argue that multifamily and commercial are complementary.
Okay. And the point that I'm making is I don't want to set an example necessarily where the definition, or we're defining the word mix of complementary land uses where it doesn't address housing at all in that statement. I don't want to automatically create a definition for that statement to mean high-density housing. That would be my concern right there. Aside from offering a specific housing option for future residents of this community, what benefit does this development bring to the community? And we can look specifically, you say fiscally.
Well, certainly there's talk throughout the comp plan of these additional housing options. Certainly the town, right, and I think we talked at maybe the last hearing about it's roughly 84%, I believe, developed as low density single family. So there's certainly, from our understanding, a need for this type of housing, simply a higher density, right, to be, I apologize, where am I going with this? It has been identified as an area in which we don't have very much and that we could certainly use more housing options. In this particular area, again, I will let the applicant maybe discuss what they're envisioning, why they think this is the best area for this project. Again, it was obviously at one time envisioned to be residential at a certain density anyway. And so that's why we have sort of brought this back to you tonight with this is revised from the first go around a couple months ago to be more in line with other existing projects in the town, which to our knowledge seem to be occupied and something that we don't have an abundance of.
Okay. And I would also question the negative fiscal impact of converting it away from commercial. Have we looked at what that possibly might do as far as lost revenues?
From actual revenues, no, that has not been reviewed. It was something that was brought up by the Planning Commission. It was probably the main reason that was stated by the commissioners who are not in favor of the project. The change from commercial to residential did support this project in several other ways, including traffic and that type of thing. But that's certainly, you know, up to the board to decide if they think that's appropriate.
Right. And the Planning Commission recommended denial based on a 3-3 vote, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
So it was a 3-3 split vote.
Okay. And what is your recommendation to us tonight?
Originally to the Planning Commission, staff did recommend approval. Because there was no strong evidence against the project, meaning the traffic reports came back to support it. The applicant's willing, you know, water is available through TriView and that type of thing, so there was no objections to it. However, I bring forward to you the Planning Commission's recommendation, the discussion that was had at that hearing. There was the comment about the change from commercial to residential and the potential loss of tax revenue or that type of thing. And then, let's see, if the other discussion was, there were a couple of comments from the public. I don't know if that's the way to vote or not. And there was comments, as I believe yourself mentioned at the last hearing, that there were some comments through the comprehensive plan process that wasn't the most desirable land use per the citizens. And so that was what was brought up based on their vote.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Couple questions on the planning commission in our packet states they approved it for the larger density, but then denied it for the lower density.
That is correct. Their first recommendation at 20 to 24 was approval with a 4-2 vote, and then a 3-3 vote with this revision. So that was a little bit unusual.
Okay. And then planning commission gets the same packets we do, correct? They didn't-
Essentially, yes. I just add what happened at
Okay.
their hearing for your package.
I noticed one of the comments by the planning commission was the lack of want for a large apartment building. I didn't see any renderings of a large apartment building.
That's correct. I think there were a couple assumptions made there.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments for Ms. Jones? Would the applicant like to present, please?
Oh, it's not up yet.
All right. Good evening, trustees. I'm John Murrow. I'm with NES. I'm representing Goodwin Knight on the proposal that's before you tonight for the amendment to the sketch plan. I'll try to not rehash too much of the things that you already know since you have seen this before. As mentioned, this is located just east of I-25 and the Baptist interchange. It is a 10-acre parcel. As Jennifer previously discussed, there was past approvals done in 2005 and 2010 where the use was changed through the sketch or the PD site plan approval process. I do understand through your process that is allowed in some instances, and I think for whatever reason, which as Jennifer mentioned, we weren't able to kind of understand why they had done that in the past. So we felt it was prudent to go through the PD sketch plat approval process prior to the site plan approval. As mentioned, it's a 10-acre parcel, and we're amending lots 5C, 10A, and 10B, which, as Jennifer mentioned, were commercial uses before. Previous review and presentation to the board proposed a higher density, which was 20 to 24 DUs per acre. We have then since reduced this to 15.99 to 20, as Jennifer mentioned, in keeping with the VISAs at Jackson Creek, which was approved at about 19 acres, or DUs per acre. Something to kind of think about that too, when we were looking at that, there are certain parcels, if you break that up into the individual parcels, those densities reach about 25 DUs per acre on the smaller parcels. The net density is 19 DUs per acre though on that parcel specifically. Something to be mentioned that is in keeping with the past approvals is on the southeast side. As Jennifer mentioned, there is single family to the south, but there is a 50-foot buffer that was previously approved with the initial sketch plan approval, which noted the multifamily density. And we are planning to keep that buffer along with the new use change. It seemed prudent to keep that, to assist in that buffering of the developments to the southeast and help even further to kind of deal with any kind of buffering of the houses and apartments. It should be noted, and as mentioned and you guys had asked, is there is intent to do apartment buildings, for rent apartment buildings. That is the intent. The density change from the 20 to 24 DUs per acre ended up resulting in a quick study of losing a building. So it would be 4 buildings approximately that we would look on the site with amenities, clubhouse, those types of things. Just to discuss the comprehensive plan consistency, Jennifer did touch on theirs. This is consistent with the CC future land use designation. We, as I spoke about, are showing transition and buffering from the single family to the south, moving to the commercial adjacent to the property. We feel that this use focuses density in a location that's accessible to nearby services, similar to the Jackson Creek commercial across the way. Also provides a nice transition between those uses and the single family to the south. One of the things that we talked about too is that there is existing controlled access on the site with adequate ingress and egress onto the site. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the traffic report specific. We feel that the use promotes the Compliance mixed-use goal of thoughtful integration of uses that serves and promotes pedestrian-oriented zoning and the live-work-play model for such uses. It strengthens the goal of focusing tax-generating uses in the town limits and locates density in accessible, well-buffered area at the southern town limits. Some of the discussion in the comprehensive plan talks about tax-generating uses and where they should be located along the I-25 corridor of the town centers. It was thought in planning this and thinking about how we use this area to keep this closer to the southern end of the town, creating that buffer as we spoke about, but then also promoting the mixed-use effort in this area. There's, with the subsequent commercial land that's existing to the north again and around there, the church to the east, it provides a nice thoughtful buffer and then gives access to the highway. Some of the things we looked at in this reduced density and in the proposal with the consistency to the comprehensive plan was that it contributes to that mixed housing options that you spoke about. To serve the growing area workforce and more affordable housing alternative for new homeowners or those transitioning in and out of housing from single-family detached residents. Some of the things that we looked at were options related to housing in the market. It's mostly single-family driven in the town of Monument. Most of the town median sales prices in this area are about $446,000. To apply for a $440,000 loan, your median income needs to be about $90,000, assuming you have no debt. So with this proposal, it helps provide that mixed use of housing options for the growing workforce, for your teachers, your firefighters, your policemen. It gives them that ability to transition into the market, and we'll talk a little bit more about the product specifically with the client here in a little bit. As mentioned previously, and you are familiar with, there is a reduced overall traffic with this change in use. Previously, with the commercial use, the trip generation was about 2,853 trips per day. With this new multifamily trip generation, we're at about 1,251, which reduces the overall trips to 1,006, or reduces it by 1,600 trips approximately. The development is served by 4 existing access points. There is a right-in, right-out just at the middle, moving down Struthers, a full movement at the very south end, a right-in only as you're coming down East Baptist, and then 3/4 in and out on the very other side, on the easternmost portion. Some of the things that were discussed early on at, I believe, the board and the planning commission were some of the concerns about detention. There is adequate detention facility to the south. With this new site, there is approximately 1.5 acre-feet of volume, with the new development only producing about 1 acre-foot of volume. So still leaving capacity in that pond. At this point, I'll pass it over to Brian Kniep with Good Night. Let him tell you a little bit about himself, the company, and kind of some of the ideas that we thought about for this use.
Thanks, John. As you mentioned, my name is Brian Kniep. I'm Director of Planning for Goodwin Knight. We're a small local developer here in El Paso County. We develop up and down the Front Range and develop everything from a multitude of apartment, multifamily housing to office, commercial, other retail type developments. We're part of the overall Challenger Group. So Challenger Homes is part of that parent company as well. So we're associated with them. Just to give you kind of some background, we are in partnership with a local landowner by the name of Ed Ellsworth on this project. He owns this site. We're the developer for him on this site, so he's in the audience here tonight. And when it comes to talking about how he's marketed it with commercial versus residential and whatnot, I defer to him because he's done that a lot longer than I have on this particular piece of property. When we start looking at pieces of property like this, we really start to figure out, all right, what do we have on the site that's that we can capitalize on? In this case, we've got a great amount of views. We've got a lot of grade change from one end to the other. I believe it's about 70 feet vertically from northeast to southwest. We've got access to shopping. We've got access to transportation corridors, easy on and off onto I-25 and Baptist Road and whatnot. We really saw this as an infill possibility because there's existing infrastructure already in place that was developed out with a lot of commercial development a number of years ago. So we're not trying to drag utilities out to the far reaches of the county like happens in some cases. We try to focus in where we can to create better neighborhoods here at the local end. When we start looking at our renters that we would have in this particular community, the first one we looked at was commuters going to and from Denver and to and from the Springs. As I mentioned, Challenger Homes is one of our sister companies. Is building in Misty Acres right now. They range anywhere from about 20 to 30% of their current buyers are buyers who are commuting north from there. You can just buy more house in El Paso County than you can in Douglas. And so we've seen that that's also a growing trend in the rental market as we move further and further south. We're also in a fairly underserved market in this area. There's high demand and low inventory. If you look at the northern end of the Springs, market rate apartment housing is fairly limited. There's a pipeline of projects happening, but they aren't coming online fast enough, and there's enough pent-up demand that we've got several years to build out really to get to a point where we reach that market sweet spot, I guess you could say. As John mentioned, these apartments and whatnot are generally geared towards your first-time renters, people just coming into the market. We've had a great deal of market research done on several other developments that we've been working on that have shown that we've got a large number of millennials that are moving into the market as first-time renters. They did not find gainful employment for a number of years. They lived at home and they're starting to move out, get on their own and whatnot. So we see that as a positive trend. We're also starting to see a lot of move down and retiree type renters, which has been kind of an interesting thing to watch. I'm sure you're familiar with age-targeted rental housing with age-restricted communities like 55+ types of situations. We try to set up our communities in such a way that we don't necessarily have to market to age-targeted consumers, but we have the ability to if we need to. We try to put in elevators, we try to put in a lot of various things that, accessible units, things of that nature, beyond what we would be required to by federal housing standards, to really draw in that type of person who might be moving towards more an independent living type of scenario. Gives them the opportunity to live with a wide range of folks, everybody from the young family to the old retiree, all working as one in one community. So right now, as rents trending currently in northern El Paso County, we'd be looking at probably about $1,400 a month for an average rent in here. Mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom homes. As we get further into the market study and market analysis, we start to drill down to what the mix of user really is. And generally speaking, 2 bedrooms are your kind of your bulk, but we vary between percentages on 1s and 3s for the most part. Because of the site slope, again, we're looking at probably walkout condition with the building. So one side being 3 stories, one side being 4, one side being 2, one side being 3, that type of thing, just to help pick up grade. Retaining walls are expensive, they make your site hard to develop, so we try to avoid it when possible, take up grade with buildings when we can. Let's see, the buildings that we've probably designed for this are based off of a central corridor. So not really your typical garden level walk-up type of apartment housing. A couple of the examples you can see up there on the screen show a 3-story and a 4-story variation on a very similar building. Essentially you have secured access into the building from various points around the perimeter, and then your unit is accessed off a common climate controlled hallway internal to the building. If they are 4-story, we do put in elevators into them, so you've got that ability in the center of the building to take the elevator up to your unit. Generally, our units average about 1,000 square feet. Our 1 bedrooms are about 700 square feet. 3 bedrooms are up around 1,300 square feet in that range. We do what would be considered, I guess, single-family detached type finishes in all of our apartment units. Granite countertops, stainless steel appliances. We try to do brushed nickel hardware on all of the bath accessories, faucets, that type of thing. We try to make these feel a little bit more high-end, if you will, I guess, in certain cases. And in reality, it's a value play for us. With our home building side and this side, we get certain discounts that we can pass on to consumers. We also have a standard 9-foot ceilings in all of our apartments. So you get nice, big, open spaces within it. It makes the units feel big. We focus on large windows in there, bring a lot of light in, make these very nice, very livable type units. They all have individual balconies. We do a lot of laminate flooring. And generally we do pretty contemporary designs. But the beauty of some of what we're showing up there is we can take a similar building footprint and essentially skin it, overframe it, do whatever we need to match architecture within a community that we're visiting. So it helps us out a great deal there. You can see there's a variety of exterior materials that we use on these. Generally we have detached garages in it. When we start to talk amenities, as John had mentioned, a community of this size with approximately 160 to 180 units would be looking at a clubhouse, probably around 4,000, 3,500 square feet in that range. Small pool, some sort of patio with probably a fire pit on it, some outdoor grills. We'd have small workout facility, game rooms, family entertainment type rooms, the typical things you see in apartment clubhouses these days. For site amenities, we do a lot of tot lot, play lot type of areas for kids. We do dog parks in all of our developments. Anymore in Colorado, you're as likely to have 2 dogs as you are to have 2 kids, so we try to take advantage of that. We've been adding dog washes into our developments. We incorporate a lot of walking trails, outdoor gathering spaces, and we started to add car washes into apartments as well, just as another amenity. So that's kind of the big picture of what we tend to develop in these scenarios, and in this case. As John mentioned, we aren't fully into any type of design yet to really show you a site plan or anything, but the examples we threw up there figured it would give you at least a taste of some of the things that we've built or are building currently throughout the area that would be similar in style and nature. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions for either of us.
Okay, questions from the board?
I appreciate all of that information. You said average rent about $1,400 a month. Can you give me an idea of a broader range for the 1, 2, and 3? I'd like to get a better idea of the math behind the full spectrum of options.
Well,
you don't. I'm not going to lock you into it. So.
Well, it always boils down to what your unit mix is, obviously,
right,
to get to your average. But generally speaking, your 1 bedrooms are going to be in the 900 to 1,100 range. Your 3 bedrooms are going to be in the 1,600 to 1,700 range, and it really depends on any view premiums or any other types of premiums we can charge. When the type of year is they're renting, that's going to vary from person to person, that type of thing. A 2 bedroom generally is going to be around 1,300, 1,400 a month.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions from you?
I just had 2 questions. I'm a little bit confused when you spoke about the 20 to 24 units of which you came to us in 2017, and it was a 3-3, but now you just made the comment that you would be losing a building by that, so you went to this, but you submitted under that. So which is it? Because I'm just looking at the variations, going from 10 to 12, 20 to 24, and then you're saying why we didn't want to do it, but that was a 3-3. So I'm a little bit confused here.
In regards to the density change?
Yeah. Because, I mean, you came with the 20 to 24.
Yeah.
So there was nothing about you potentially losing a building, but when it didn't pass, now you're coming back and go, well, we wouldn't have done that because they wouldn't have met. So can you please articulate that?
Yeah, of course. Originally, when we first looked at the site, we looked at kind of a quick understanding of what we thought the site was capable of. And that's what dictated that 20 to 24 unit range. Understanding that, you know, based on the parking needs, the needs for amenities, that's where that original proposal started from. After some discussion, after hearing your comments in regards to the density and probably maximizing the space too much, we looked at a revised density, looking at more efficient use of the buildings, more efficient use of amenities, and coming back with that lower use. Somewhat and also considering past approvals of like the vistas at Jackson Creek and what those are to try to be consistent with growth in the town of Monterey Rapids.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
And then 2 other questions. Will these facilities have covered parking, or are they open lots? How does that work?
Based on, once we move into the PD site plan approval piece, we will look at that more. That is the desired route. We are looking at that buildings for parking. The reason we are also thinking about that too preliminarily is it also assists in buffering for houses to the south. So by putting those buildings there, you create some screens along with the 50-foot landscape buffer. It gives you those abilities to soften those views. There was, at the last the very first planning commission, there was some neighbors that showed up and discussed some items. They actually liked the use versus the commercial because it was less intense. The only really concerns that they had or questions were about the drainage, which we asked. They were concerned about historic drainage and how that would be affected.
To speak too a little bit on your question regarding the parking, we do generally try to get about 30% attached garages within the development itself for our parking. 30% of the total unit numbers as detached garages within there. We also do kind of cantilever covered parking from time to time as well. It really becomes there's a lot of dials to turn, I guess you could say, on the spreadsheet when you're trying to figure out exactly what makes a project pencil versus what it doesn't. But we've even gone to where we've done a fewer number of garages but added storage units onto the ends of the garages to give one more option for renters who might have skis, might have bikes, something to store. So.
And then my final question, the traffic report. When was that done?
I apologize. I meant to speak about that.
I mean,
the traffic report was done last August and then subsequently revised in September. And then more recently for this last submittal, they re-looked at the uses and how that would affect the traffic demand.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yep.
I appreciate it.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
I have a question about parking. I know we haven't we're just on the sketch plan right now, but just based on your prior experience, having a certain number of garages per unit, and so you've got 4 people in a unit and 3 to 4 drive, how's the parking going to work out?
We generally follow whatever the jurisdictional guidelines are on parking. I want to say Town of Monument averages about two parking spaces per dwelling unit. Somewhere around there, 2 to a little bit more than that, including some additional guest parking that is called for as well. Generally, we like to see about 1.8 to 1.9, depending on the situation, on average. In this type of development, we might shoot a little bit higher than that, just to take into account that we do see that we would have a lot of commuters in this type of development, versus a downtown environment where we're going to have a lot of people riding bikes.
And also considerations given for like the clubhouse for people that are coming to check out the lease space, so there's consideration for that parking.
So you guys first came in 2005 to develop this project?
No, that was the very initial approval.
Okay.
The 2005 was past approval of a different landowner. 2010, again, a subsequent approval that has not came to fruition. And then we just more recently came to this last year in October.
Okay. So what was your deciding factor to change from commercial to multifamily residential?
Well, Ed Ellsworth, the landowner, approached us, and he had marketed it for quite some time. How many years did he own the property?
We may take a minute after.
Okay. But anyway, he had marketed the property for a number of years as commercial development. And because of site constraints with steepness of site, it gets really tough to get big swaths of parking out of the site like that, and there was just not a lot of interest or takers, especially where there wasn't any major frontage to a road like Baptist or Struthers. It becomes a little bit more isolated, I think, and I think that leads to why back in 2005 they originally looked at it as multifamily.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Ms. Jones, I'm assuming there's no height restriction in that area for buildings, or is there?
45. I think it's.
I'm sure that would be,
It's
they
similar
could
to.
designate that on their PD site plan.
Okay.
Yes, it is similar with the hotel. I know we won't be exceeding that height.
Thank you, gentlemen. This is a public hearing. So would anybody like to speak against this rezoning? Seeing none, would anybody like to speak for this ordinance?
I'll start.
Now's the time where you would actually
Um,
sign. We need to sign in. The other people didn't, but we did.
I think my wife's anxious to say a few things, but if I could, just as a preface, as an introduction, and prior to that, first off, thank you very much for your service. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your consideration. Also, want to thank our mayor who's absent, law enforcement, our police chief. I know that the staff that we've worked with have been extremely helpful and have represented us very well. And I want to thank you very much.
So our names are Ed and Jody Ellsworth. We're the owner. We've owned it for about 4 years. And just as a further introduction, we lived in Chaparral Hills, which borders the property, for nearly 20 years. We raised a family of 5 kids. We know that area exceptionally well. We have a lot of friends that border that property.
Can I just ask, you guys, how many of you have actually seen, any of you seen the property? When they showed the map on that, have you, you're familiar with the lay of the land and the views that it has and how it backs up to that? Okay, so all of you have?
Yeah, anyways, we've lived here since Baptist had barbed wire fence and cows where Jackson Creek is. We care about the area. We have friends that are in the group today that we haven't even had a chance to say hello to. We do care about this development. It's just Jody and I. We're not a big corporation. We want to develop this property responsibly. We've partnered with Goodwin, who we think will do that and will do an exceptionally good job. And that's our desire. To answer the previous question, over the 4 years that we've owned it, we've pretty much had 0 interest commercially. That's the reality of it. And we pay a lot of taxes. We can't afford to just have it sit vacant. We need to do something. Being a previous resident of that area, we thought, how would we want it to be developed? And we've likewise talked with some of the people that live adjacent to it. And we feel like it would be much more desirable to have what we'd consider a low-key transition from pretty light commercial to mostly 5-acre parcels. And it would be low lighting and just pretty low-key. Just if I could knock out just a couple of concerns that I've heard. First off, water. I have not taken part in much of the planning, but the one area that I have personally spent some time with is in the water area. And I've worked with TriView, and not only are they capable of providing the water, but they are really, really wanting us to do this because it helps them tremendously to pay for their infrastructure. So not only are they able, but they're very willing and hopeful that this goes through. We've talked about traffic. Traffic, it's got fantastic access, ingress, egress. It flows really well, and it's a reduction from the commercial. We've talked a little bit about tax revenue. We understand that this is less tax revenue from commercial, but we don't have commercial interest. And this provides huge tax revenue potential versus what it is today. Compatibility, we talked a little bit about that. These buildings that were described, they're intended to blend in very well. And like my wife started to mention, the topography slopes down. And so our thought is that this area kind of disappears from Baptist, you shouldn't see much of it because it slopes so quickly. And that might be part of the reason that we don't have interest commercially, because how do you have like a tiered shopping center? But you can do that with housing. And it's been previously considered for and approved for multi-housing, the 10 to 12. Unfortunately, 10 to 12 doesn't pencil. We cannot put a financial plan together that supports that. With all the infrastructure that we have to put in place, it doesn't work. And so our question would be, if not this, which the housing development seems to want, we would, having previously lived there 20 years, and it doesn't block any views. It's smaller than the hotel. It's smaller than the church, each of the buildings. It's like, what's better? I don't know what it is. And so we feel like it's a good use. The need, we did a feasibility study 2 years ago. we've worked on this for years. We've put a lot of time and money into this, and this is like just enough to make it work. When we reduce that density, it's like, okay, this is what it takes to do it. And so, but there is a high demand, and I was in another planning or Board of Commissioners review with another project, and there's an economic development group that was here. They did a study. I don't know if any of you were in your positions, but I remember years ago, the conclusion was this segment of the market is very much in need. Not where they wanted it, but the fortunate thing is that the location is very desirable. And I have read over the comprehensive plan, and I do understand the pros and cons and the sentiments of the citizens. We respect that. I would ask you to consider, if there was going to be multi-family housing, where would you want it? I don't think it would fit in too well on this side of the freeway. On the other side of the freeway, chances are it would impact housing. This doesn't impact housing, doesn't impact traffic. You know, we could consider like the apartments a mile to the south. Has that been a negative impact for the town of Monument? I wouldn't think so. So to fill that need, it seems like this is the best location on the furthest southern part of the town to do that. We feel like not only that this there's a need, but that there's a message being sent. If the town of Monument does not allow multi-family housing, what message is that? That we don't want millennials, we don't want lower income, we don't want elderly, we don't want people that are single. What's the message being sent? I'm concerned that it might be portrayed as discriminatory. It certainly has to be controlled. We want to do it responsibly, but we're very confused as far as why there would be any negativism. I mean, if there is a choice between something, very desirable, or, we understand that this is not the highest priority for the town, but there's a need, and we want to do it responsibly. You saw some renderings. They're high end, but yet they fill that need, and they're affordable enough for teachers and lower income people. We've left this meeting and had people stop us in the hall and say, we really need this. I can't believe, the vote was tied.
So why, and that's why I came in with, I haven't been here, it's just my money that has to pay the property taxes every time, and so I was floored that there were votes against it. So maybe you could, those of you that voted against it, explain to me why. I mean, why? Because like he said, it doesn't seem to make any sense. Mr. Koopman, you asked what would it bring to the community? Mm-hmm. That piece of property was annexed by Monument, if you remember, if you were around. Why? I mean, for what reason?
I can't tell you why it was annexed. I was not involved with that annexation. I have comments, and once we get through your presentation, we can get on to the board member comments. I do appreciate everything that you all have said, though.
Well, last time, if I may, and to be candid, there were comments after our presentation, and we didn't get a chance to address those. And so I would ask if there's comments, concerns that haven't been addressed, if you could perhaps bring those up now and give us an opportunity to address them.
Because a no vote means we start square one again with nothing. And so I feel like I have the right to understand why.
Last time we had a meeting, the good mayor, he voted in favor. He's not here tonight. Tonight we need a 4-2 in favor vote.
So we're in the public comment portion.
Yeah.
Thank you for your comments.
Okay.
I'll move forward with any other comments, and then we'll go back to board questions and concerns.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Hayes, would you like to speak for this ordinance?
Believe it or not, yes. I'm going to say that this is probably one of the rare times you will see me come before you and suggest we move from commercial to residential. Maybe one of the only ones, but I am going to say this is actually a very poor spot for commercial. You guys are very familiar with it. It is hidden behind a whole row of other commercial spots. Ingress and egress for business people coming in all day long is not great. But for someone living there, leaving in the morning and coming back in the evening from work is just perfect. Many of the people living in that area are probably going to be walking to work. There's a ton of jobs in the Jackson Creek area. So they're going to be able to ride their bikes and they're going to be able to walk, and it's going to create another second walkable area that we are trying to develop downtown here, but I think in the Jackson Creek area, it would be a perfect area. Those people, although I understand from a commercial standpoint that you might have more from a tax dollar standpoint, but think about how many people there are going to be spending their tax dollars in our existing businesses there. So they are going to have an impact. We need this for our current and hopeful future residents, our seniors, young families, those just starting out in their career. I hear from businesses all the time that they are having trouble finding enough people to work because they're having to commute in, and for when you're first starting out in your career, when you have a lower dollar amount per hour, driving 20, 30 minutes is kind of a lot for them to do that. $1,400 may seem like a lot, I know, but to two 25-year-olds who are roommates in a 2-bedroom apartment, it's not bad, it's doable. They can pay $700 a month. I know I actually had roommates for the first 10 years of me being a so-called adult who didn't have roommates when they were in their 20s. So this at least allows our younger people and our younger families, especially young families with 2 incomes, to be able to be in our community without having to buy a $450,000 home. Right now, the Vistas is the only consistent property that has rental units available in our community. We get calls all the time, being a visitor center also, that we have for people saying, where can I rent? I'm like, good luck. I myself have a house downtown that I rent. It took me a year to find that place. They're not readily available. In my 6.5 years that I have been here with the Chamber and EDC, not one person has ever complained to me about the Vistas. And when I mention apartments to someone, sometimes they're going, what? What apartments? They don't even realize that they're there. And where this particular piece of property is, it is going to be in a good location for them. The other last great point I have is just that this is Challenger Homes. So you saw the renderings. It is not some small development company. This is someone who has been building in our community for years. And they are going to have a good-looking property. Similar to the Vistas, it's a good-looking property that we need. So, like I said, it's not going to be very often that I'm going to say this, but we are definitely for this because our community needs it from the price point and availability, and also it is the best use of that particular parcel. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hayes. Any other comments from the public? Ma'am?
So my name is Susan Gonzalez. I live in Jackson Creek, and I would just like to comment that I have, we've lived here 12 years now. My kids I have 5 children. They've all gone to school here. My youngest one was 1 when we moved here. The oldest was 12. He is now graduating from college. Met a girl here, got married. They want to move back to Monument, but there is no place for them to move back to. And he is going to be a potential great income earner. I mean, he's at Stanford University. So a great potential income earner. She's a special education teacher, something that we need in this community is special education teachers. You will lose them in this community unless you start thinking about building affordable housing for these young people. He has many similar friends who are also graduating from college, getting ready. They love growing up in Monument. It is their dream to raise their families here. And we are shutting them out and sending them to other communities where they will end up living unless we have something available to them. Does that make sense to everyone? And I think we're really limiting, because our housing is getting so expensive, we're limiting them to be able to go in and find affordable housing in any other way unless they can rent in this community while they're saving for a down payment for a house. And so I am in favor of this. I think it's something our community needs. I think that's something that will help build our community, help our community look like it's inclusive to all age groups and inclusive to those people who grew up here and want to move back here and start their families here.
Thank you, ma'am.
Can you please sign in?
Oh, yes.
Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for additional comments or motion or questions. Oh, okay. Did the applicant have any rebuttal or anything? Okay. Board?
Thank you.
Right here.
I appreciate the dialogue, the commentary, absolutely. I understand completely the desire to have, I'm not going to say affordable housing, but more affordable housing options here in the community for our lower income earners, our hourly wage earners, a variety of very important employees to our local employers. I absolutely agree that there's the high demand, low inventory equals great business opportunity, and there is no doubt in my mind that every single one of those apartments will fill up with yearly leases year after year after year. However, the math behind this is showing that it would likely be very different people than what we're trying to project here as far as who we're building this community for and what population we're serving. There's a lot of reference to lower income earners, median house, household, what's the median house go for? What's the average house sale price here in Monument? And there's lots of confusion. And then you throw in the annual salaries of our police officers or our teachers. My wife's a teacher. We both moved here or purchased our home here. We all grew up here, but back in 2012. So I mean, the market was doing pretty well back then. Point is, median does not mean average, meaning if a median house is $415,000, that's right smack dab in the middle. That does not mean the average household price here in our community is $415,000. And you also look at the salaries. To afford a $400,000 house, sure, someone, one income family who makes $50,000, it wouldn't be responsible for them to purchase that house. But you look at people who are purchasing houses. It is typically families, typically two-income families, where you make it much easier to get to that $90,000 threshold, which is the median, not the average. Mathematically, Ms. Hayes, you suggest these are going to be people who are going to be walking to work, our hourly jobs. Minimum wage in January 1 went up to $10.30 in the state of Colorado. Also, with the Affordable Care Act, most large employers started limiting hours for hourly employees to under 30 hours per week to avoid the penalties of not offering responsible benefits for those employees. So if you do the math, just minimum wage, we're just looking minimum wage-wise, $10.30 per hour. 30-hour work week is $309 per week, or about $1,300 per month in income. When you have an average $1,400 apartment, these are not the people that we're talking about building homes for. These are people like myself. I commute 30 minutes to work every day, 6 days a week, to and from. A lot of people do. It's what we do. Don't get confused by the desire to want to serve a population that makes less, than lots of us. Where I consider myself incredibly fortunate. But you can't approve projects under the guise that this is a responsible way to tackle that problem or that need in our community. And what we're going to have here is we're going to have 400 to 600 new residents commuting into their new home in a $1,500 apartment, and the people who still make $10.30 per hour are commuting 35, 45 minutes to get here.
Well, it doesn't have to be 1,400, and it didn't increase to 15 in 5 minutes.
Okay, it's
Any additional comments from the board?
Yeah, I guess I voted last time against this, and the reason was I'm concerned about high density. I am. That's my opinion, and it may not be valid, but it's still my opinion. I'm doubly concerned this time because the Planning Commission, the vote changed there, and it was a 3-3 tie there. I guess I have once before been the only person to vote no on something because I believe the Planning Commission either didn't understand, and I'd like to make sure they were briefed before it comes to us, or they did understand, and I try to listen to what the Planning Commission recommends and think about it seriously before I make a vote. So, you know, this is not an easy thing, I guarantee you. And the bottom line is, what we did is we moved something from 20 to 24 density to 16 to 20. You know, had it been 12 to 16, I might have in fact felt differently. But the bottom line is, I understand it's a business opportunity, and there are in fact economic issues that have to be dealt with. Not easy, but that's unfortunately the way it is. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions, or motion?
Couple comments. Thank you all for presenting. I agree that we need to diversify our housing portfolio. Trustee Elliott mentioned workforce housing. The high density thing, you know, I respectfully disagree with some of my colleagues. High density is, we can get 6 tonight, different opinions on what high density is and its impact on the community. You know, people need to live, and I'm not going to disparage people for how much money they make or where they need to live or how they're going to change our community. What I hear is Mr. Ellsworth, Mrs. Ellsworth, a property owner who is trying to do something with his property. And I find it sends chills down my spine to have government tell somebody they can't do something with their property. You know, the reason I asked how long you've had it on the market for commercial directly goes to the Planning Commission's issue of losing tax revenue from a commercial project. Well, if we lose $0 from the non-existent commercial projects on it, I'm fine with that. I would much rather see something added to our community, adding to the vibrance of our community, than an empty lot. And that's all I got to say.
Thank you. Any other comments or motion?
Motion to approve ordinance number 042018, an ordinance approving sketch plan amendment to the Monument Ridge Plan Development.
Second.
Ms. Hogan?
Mayor Pro Tem Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Medlicott?
Yes.
Trustee Koopman?
No.
Trustee Murphy?
No.
Trustee Elliott?
Yes.
Trustee Bornstein?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-2. Next, we have ordinance number 052018, an ordinance approving a rezoning and preliminary PD site plan for the Connexxus Business Park. Ms. Jones.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, hello again. This is the last time you'll hear from me tonight, I think. All right. Let's get to our project. Okay, Connexxus Business Park. Again, this is for a zone change and preliminary PD site plan. This was originally projected DA 12-2017, and this is ordinance number 5 tonight. Okay, this is a very far out view. Just to give you an idea of the area we're speaking about, the subject property is highlighted in yellow. I-25 is directly to the east or to the right of this project, and Old Denver Road is on the left. if you can see WW up there, that is the recent Wagons West project that was approved by this board. It was annexed into the town. And then the ice rink is also highlighted on there just to give you a couple reference points. And then we're going to zoom in a little bit more. Go back to that one just for a second. So I just wanted to point out the overall area. So downtown Monument is up in the north, the top left of the screen, and then you've got Jackson Creek over to the right from this area. Again, zoomed in a little bit. The Wagons West, that's the most recent thing, one of the most recent things that you've heard, that's located essentially across the street from this project. Again, the ice rink, and then the Trails End neighborhood is located at the top of this screen. This property is about 23 acres. And then I'm going to go off track here for just a second and go speak about something I don't normally speak about. This project in particular, probably been one of them. There's been a lot of rumors spread about it. There's been a lot of people that have misunderstood what was being proposed. And so I just wanted to address that quickly before we got into the details of the project. I know the planning department has received a lot of phone calls, a lot of questions. We're looking at the chamber trying to clarify, right, just to be sure everyone has facts, so that we can all make decisions on facts. First thing is that nothing has been decided. There's been one public hearing so far before the Planning Commission. There will be more public hearings. Again, you all will make one decision tonight. Before anything could be built, it would have to come back to you at least one time, and I'm guessing it would come back several times to cover the entire property. I'll talk about that a little bit more. Second thing, this property has been zoned for industrial development since it was annexed into the town in 1987. I believe the applicant even will speak to you about when in fact it was in the county, it was also zoned for industrial development. So that's nothing new. That's something else that has been some surprises to folks. And so again, just trying to clarify some of the rumors and the misconceptions about this project. The last thing, business park or light industrial, it doesn't necessarily mean a factory or a refinery, right? We're not talking I-70. It doesn't mean a junkyard. So these are kind of the types of rumors and misconceptions that have been floating around. The neighborhood impact is important, and that's one of the main things we're here to talk about tonight. So just wanted to throw that out there, kind of clarify before we get into the details. And there are quite a few details to discuss. Okay, so summary of this project. So this property is currently zoned Regency Park Planned Industrial Development, which is a little bit odd, right, because it's on the other side of the highway, but it's part of Regency Park, it's also part of Triview. The property owner, or the developer, based on some of the conversations that they've had with staff, and staff's recommendation is actually proposing to rezone it to planned development. Now, there are several reasons why we talked through that, and some of the benefits of that is that the main one is it allows for customization. So we can work with them to get exactly what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to develop a pretty specific idea of this business part. It allows that customization rather than just referring to exactly how the code is currently written, right? Regency Park, it's codified, it outlines what uses are allowed, heights, and things like that. If you don't rezone it, you just fall back to what the code currently says. We can't add anything additional. Additional control and review is what I have up there. The other big benefit of going planned development is that it allows, for the developer, it allows them to sort of break their approvals up into pieces, and for the town, it allows multiple reviews. So tonight they're proposing to rezone it to planned development and then a preliminary PD site plan that doesn't get into any specifics, that doesn't plat the property. We don't have details, but it allows some parameters to be set so that we can get a feel and an idea of the type of development that could go in there, and then we have something to review future plans against. If that makes a little bit of sense. Finally, the benefit allows for preliminary design approval. Get a kind of design of the overall plan. All 23 acres, you can essentially create what I'm going to casually call a master plan rather than one lot at a time coming in, being reviewed one time by this board, approved, and then we wouldn't necessarily consider that when we look at the next lot, right? So it would be lot by lot. This allows to look at the entire property. As I mentioned, this is 23 acres. It's a little bit unique in that it's bounded by creeks on the north and the south side, which create a few challenging issues. And then I think I've already kind of covered that one. It sets the parameters for the future development. The types of parameters, and we'll go into the details on most all of them. The uses, obviously. Building size, number of lots, architecture, landscaping. We can set some basic parameters for those, and then we would go back and review them on a very detailed basis when they brought a final PD site plan in. Just real quick on the benefits of the PD, the reason that that type of customization and the two parts is important is because the developer doesn't necessarily know who their users would be at this time, right? They don't necessarily have lined up 8 businesses that are going to move in there. So they're trying to sort of preliminarily set the stage for what would go in there. This is a clip from the current town zoning map. As you can see, it's zoned, that white stripe for hatching is Regency Park and is planned industrial. The property to the north and the south is all zoned that way as well, and then across the street, or across the highway, across I-25. Okay, so to speak first about the zone change, I mentioned a little bit about why they're requesting to rezone to PD. Again, without doing that, the uses and the site development standards are set in the code, and that we would have to follow those exactly as they currently are. And this allows the developer to tailor the project to their vision, right? If otherwise, anyone that meets the code, right, the use by right, you kind of get to come in and develop. So that they get to put some additional restrictions on there to create what their vision is. This proposal is actually more restrictive than what the code would currently allow, and I think that's an important note that was discussed quite a bit at the Planning Commission meeting. They're tailoring the uses. There was a lot of public comment about that as well, and then establishing even additional parameters that in some ways limit their project, but in other ways help create what they're trying, help build what they're trying to create. And then again, as I mentioned, if you just did it, if you left it as is, as it's currently zoned, it would essentially come in on a lot by lot, user by user basis, rather than being able to create this sort of overall feel for a business park. With single review, I think I covered that a bit. So the PD site plan, that's really where we have a lot to talk about. The code does allow the planning director to grant the applicant to skip the sketch plan process and go directly to a preliminary PD site plan. That makes sense when it's a smaller project and it's essentially not a mix of uses, right? When you have a lot of, you have residential and commercial or mixed use or something like that, a lot of times it makes a little bit more sense to do that sketch plan process. In this particular case, in this particular case, it makes sense that they're ready to set some of those additional parameters of the sketch plan. We would just be defining the uses, right, the land use designations. So they're ready to set some of those additional parameters in place. We've covered quite a bit of this. So as you can imagine, one of the big challenges of this, like I mentioned, they don't have a specific business, or to my knowledge, they may be talking to them, but right, that's not sort of before us right now. They don't have specific businesses that want to come in. So the challenge is to create parameters that are flexible enough to be marketable, right, to cater to a variety of potential users, while being specific enough that they and the town feel comfortable that they're going to develop the type of business park that they want. So that's certainly a challenge. And I think the applicant will admit to that as well. We've kind of gone, had a lot of conversations back and forth about how to get that to an area where everyone's comfortable. So it's definitely not easy. One of the the biggest issue, probably everybody's big question is, well, what would be allowed there? What are the uses? All the uses that are allowed in Regency Park PID are outlined in the code. This particular preliminary PD site plan outlines these particular uses, and anything not listed would be prohibited. So now this is a summary, sort of to fit on a slide, but essentially eating places, right, there could be restaurants, but no drive-through. That's primarily a traffic concern, so they've agreed to that, no drive-throughs. Industrial supply, recreational uses, a couple accessory uses there. Light industrial and manufacturing, with some caveats I'll get to on the next slide. Personal and social services, professional and administrative offices, retail or commercial. There's a couple caveats on that one as well. One in particular, no auto repair, no service stations. So they're outlining these types of specific you know, what can go here and what can't. Research facilities, warehousing, and then a conditional use for utility lines. So what did those asterisks mean? For light industrial manufacturing, outside storage is only as an accessory, it has to be screened. Maximum building, a maximum single use of 50,000 square feet, and then noise and emissions have to be inside the building. I think one of the things to highlight is on the retail, there's some specific uses. Like I said, we talked with the applicant quite a bit about this. A maximum square footage for a single use of 2,000 square foot. So they're not marketing this, they're not trying to create this as a big shopping center. You cannot have a Target or a Costco go in here. I get a lot of calls about Target and Costco. So I just want to make that clear, we're not getting a Target or a Costco. So what that means is 2,000 square feet, you could have a small retail portion, but again, it's not going to be this massive retail facility that is going to have a lot of, you know, shopping traffic. It's not going to be a grocery store or something like that, but it could be, I think we spoke with the applicant about some type of like a little bike shop, or, you know, maybe as an accessory to one of the uses, they have a small retail portion of it. So, but that's going to be limited in size. So that's going to, again, sort of tailor these uses. Other parameters that are outlined in the preliminary PD site plan, maximum number of lots 10. So there could be fewer, but no more than 10. And again, that's, again, to allow for some flexibility, exactly how many acres, you know, do these potential users need. Maximum individual building size of 50,000 square feet, but a maximum total building area on the site of 130,000 square feet. So there's a variety of ways that could play out, and that would depend on the users. But at least it's sort of, you know, giving us some guidelines, some parameters of how it could potentially work. Maximum building height, essentially 40 feet, 30 feet, 36 feet with a 4-foot parapet. That's a little fake roof to hide the things on the roof. We had some questions about that before. The current maximum building height is a little bit strangely worded in the code. It basically says 90 feet, which I don't think anybody wants to see right there. I don't know that any of that would pass this board's review, but I think it's important to point out that, again, they're really trying to tailor this down and make it something that's desirable to create this business park feel and still fit in with the area. Maximum lot coverage of 40%, just meaning it's not going to be all these big warehouses, right? There's still going to be parking and landscaping and all of those types of details. So architecture. There are some basic parameters on the PD site plan. 4-sided architecture is basic. Corner features on the front, as well as awnings and windows to sort of create this little bit more of a storefront feel. Earth tones, and then particular block, brick, stone details have to be included on all 4 sides. And then I think it's important to point out that those are all minimums, right? Those are really basic parameters to get started. The developer is actually proposing to supplement those with Property Owners Association in there and their own architectural control committee. So we wouldn't be in charge of that or review those, but that is an additional level that they would be adding to that. Very similar to a homeowners association, right? They can be more strict. We're setting the sort of the baseline with these parameters. Landscaping. And again, I'm just trying to hit on a lot of the major topics that are covered in the PD site plan. Obviously, this has major frontage on both sides, right? These 23 acres. There's quite a bit of landscaping proposed in the PD site plan. Minimum of 52 trees. It works out to 1 tree per 20 feet on the I-25 frontage, with the condition that 2/3 of those be evergreen. That could create quite a nice barrier for Old Denver Road and folks on that side from I-25 and the commercial on the other side. A minimum of 53 trees, again, 1 per 20 feet, to be installed along the frontage with the trail. And I will discuss the trail in quite a bit more detail here in just a minute. And then there's some language in there that they can substitute 1 tree for 3 large multi-stem shrubs with a size minimum, and 50% of those trees would have to be evergreen as well. So we did hear from some residents at the Planning Commission meeting and in some other meetings and discussions that we had beforehand, and a lot of the residents were actually, once they sort of envisioned that landscaping, sort of in favor of, oh, this could be, again, this could be sort of a nice barrier for me from the highway, you know, the sound and the views and that type of thing, looking over to the east. There's additional requirements about screening the parking lots and internal internal lot landscaping and things like that. But I wanted to highlight those sort of tree buffering on the perimeter. And then traffic. So we've had a lot of questions about traffic. So there was a traffic impact study prepared for the project. We asked them that we worked with the applicant to get that traffic study to also consider the Wagons West project, right? That's something brand new, additional traffic and residents just across the street. So that was prepared and included with this. Essentially, all of the intersections and roadways would continue to operate as are and/or at acceptable levels. It's not until about 2040, which is apparently the magic traffic year, when improvements are possibly warranted. And then there are some turn lanes included to accommodate both of the projects. I have a couple renderings of those. They're going to be a little bit hard to see on these screens, but I think the applicant will speak quite a bit about traffic as well. I think sort of the highlight of the traffic improvements is that the roadways would match the 3-lane section from the beginning through the extent of this project. So this is at the northern part, at the very, very bottom of the screen is actually the entrance to this particular business park, and I'm just wanted to highlight the 3-lane section that it would match. And then you have multiple turn lanes that would be included, left turn lanes in both directions, and then a right turn lane to actually get into this project, and then it's blown up just a little bit more here. Just as a brief discussion point, those are the recommended traffic improvements that would go along with this project. Obviously, when we got to a final PD site plan, all those details would be included specifically. So the Santa Fe Trail. As you're probably very well aware, Santa Fe Trail runs right essentially between this property and Old Denver Road. This has been the concern that we've heard the most. Lots of concern. There was a community meeting that was put on by the chamber. It was heard often there. So certainly it's something that we've tried to address as much as possible and get as much information about as possible. The bottom line, the trail is El Paso County jurisdiction. So they make final decisions on the trail. It's not the town's trail, to be honest. So there's actually an agreement in place, and I think the applicant will speak in quite a bit more detail about this. But there's an agreement in place between the current property owner and the county back from 2008, where there was they dedicated some land, and in exchange they got this legal agreement to grant up to 6 crossings of the trail. That's up to 6. There's language in there that says in no circumstances will there be more than 6. So that's, again, we're sort of putting all these pieces in place. It's El Paso County jurisdiction. There's a legal agreement between the county and the property owner. The town is not a party to that agreement at all. And so essentially our role in this has been to ensure that the applicant has been working with the county. The county is fully aware of their proposals, and that they support that and request anything that they need. So the cooperation, basically the county will be the ultimate reviewer and approval of anything having to do with the trail, including the one trail crossing that would be needed for this project. The county has made a couple of requests, and the applicant has agreed to make all of those, including a bench, and they'll work with them on some signage for the trail. I think that's still under discussion, the exact type of signage or push button and all of those details. Bottom line, ultimately, the applicant will have to work with the county to get those done. We will ensure that that happens. But that's sort of what we can do in terms of the trail. So we've been trying to explain that and be sure that everyone is understanding the details of the trail crossing, because that's certainly the concern we've heard the most. Understandably. So I think it's good to talk about what would happen next. Assuming approval from this board of the rezoning and the preliminary PD site plan, what could happen? Short answer is nothing could happen next. Before anything else could happen, they would have to come in with final PD site plans. Most likely that would be, per user, as a user comes in, and we would review all of the final details that you're probably wondering about now, right? The type of details that we get the most questions about. Well, what exactly is it going to look like? What's the user going to be? Where's their trash enclosure? All of the details, how's the parking and all of that. Those would all be included on a final PD site plan. So that would come back before this board. Like I said, and I mentioned at the beginning, likely multiple times, I would expect, I think it's reasonable to expect multiple users, right, would take up to 23 acres, obviously, with the parameters of no more than 10 lots. So I think it's just important to understand that those approvals, right, would just be just like tonight, would have more public hearings, another chance to hear from the public, and then it would also have to be platted and that type of thing. So it wouldn't be the end of it tonight, it's just getting started, setting those basic parameters in place. And then obviously, when we did the final PD site plans, again, those final reviews by the county, those final approvals for anything having to do with the trail. So we would ensure that that happened and bring those to you as well. So the approval criteria and comprehensive plan, talk about this project a bit. The approval criteria is actually listed there in 17.40.160E, and then there's 1 through 12. So staff's analysis finds that the proposal satisfies the approval criteria, and I wanted to highlight number 11, which is consistency with the comp plan. I think there's a couple pieces to that. Adopted as a part of the comp plan is the I-25 corridor plan from 2012 that identifies this area as business park. Exactly what we're talking about. And then there's language in all of these particular categories that talk essentially about and in support of this type of proposal and the attributes and characteristics, opportunities and policies, the future land use map, and then both the business campus and the mixed use. And I'll refer to those on this next map. So here's a little snippet from the future land use map. So I have a circle here sort of showing the general area. The light lavender that says BC is business campus, and then the MU is mixed use. This particular 23 acres is called out as mixed use on here, although it's surrounded by business campus to the north and to the south and to the east, so I'm not 100% sure what the thought was on that. However, if you look at this as a whole, this entire area, right, the Wagons West that you just approved, and then this project to the east, the existing businesses and development to the south, it really does sort of prepare that, come forward as a mixed-use project. Again, you've got residential, you've got employment, you've got some recreational down there. So I think if you can look at it as a big picture, it does make sense, like I said, and there's actually a lot of language in the comp plan that talks about this type of development, preserving the views, being compatible, you know, along the I-25 corridor and that type of thing. So this was heard before the Planning Commission, and they did recommend approval of this project based on the findings that it meets the approval criteria and all the standards. I feel like that was a pretty quick summary of sort of a big project with a lot of details. We can certainly answer any questions that you may have at this time, and I know the applicant will provide some additional information as well.
Questions from the board?
I have a couple. Just a few though. So currently it's zoned for industrial, correct?
That's correct.
And you said up to 90 feet for the buildings that are currently permitted there?
That's
as far as the height?
Right.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify so I understand fully. Has there been any concern over the broadness of some of the categories? And I understand that by choice, the landowner is wanting to restrict to particular categories. Right. Has there been any concern over broadness of some of those categories?
There was some discussion at the Planning Commission along those similar lines, and it was discussed quite a bit with staff, with the applicant. They essentially pulled most of those categories from other sections of our code.
Yeah.
So it gets a bit tricky if you try to define that. So we kind of talked a bit about how those are reviewed when they come in, you know, that type of thing, that it will always have some degree of ambiguity about what that means.
Right.
But there's sort of some standard practices in place about how we would review that and make that determination. So that, after quite a bit of discussion, it sort of ended with, I'm going to say, the revelation that those are terms that are used elsewhere in the code.
So we'd have to be cautious if we were further defining one versus another. And my main concern is the broadness of the recreation. Recreational uses. I mean, recreation could mean many, many different things, and I know some things are covered in you know, further definitions, and some things aren't. So
sure.
Now, would there be any input in the type of business in that further process that you discussed when each individual plat comes to us, or would we not look really at the type of business?
That's a good question. I don't think it would be appropriate to review the type of business at that time, again, because essentially the uses would be set
right based
on the preliminary PD site plan. There was some similar type questions again at the planning commission. There was concerns about marijuana uses and that type of thing that's expressly prohibited in other places of the code.
Do we also cover adult entertainment recreation in the code currently?
That's a good question.
There's a whole section on it that restricts it.
Okay, good. Just
do
want
not
to just
believe
want to
it's in chapter
clarify that we're.
17.
I knew the marijuana one, but okay. And I'm understanding with the Santa Fe Trail. I understand that's county. Do we have any say or input in the safety mechanisms for those crossings? As a parent with children who ride their bikes on that all summer long, what kind of safety measures or input on safety measures do we have, or would we have?
I'm going to defer to the applicant a bit on that because they've been having those active conversations with the county, and essentially, to my knowledge, we've sort of ended the conversation with they will be required to do what the county requires, but I'm sure they'll be able to give you some details about where those conversations are headed and some of the different concerns and options that are being considered.
Okay. Traffic. 2040 is the magical year when we're going to have to really seriously look at that. Planning should probably happen now.
Right.
Have we looked at what that even looks like in 2040 as far as Old Denver Highway and in particular the residential homes there, as far as the impact that it might have on those?
Yes and no.
Okay.
No specific studies have not been done at this time. We've certainly had conversations with those. Mr. Manning may want to speak to that further. I know he's had some conversations with the folks over at TriView about that. I know one of the biggest improvement areas that we hear, right, will be Second and Beacon Light. And so, what that will require, no, we certainly don't know that at this time. But those conversations are being started, which is a good thing. It hasn't always happened. So where would we be, by the time we do the final proposal? I don't know the answer to that, but certainly we're starting to have those conversations and are aware that needs to happen, at least the review and the planning of it sooner rather than later.
Well, and that isn't necessarily specific to this one development.
No,
it's as the town and the community grows, traffic needs to be looked at. So as or if concerns come up for residents who live on the west side of 25 there along Old Denver Highway, myself being one of them, we can address those concerns as they come up, if they come up.
Absolutely.
And that may further along the process of communicating.
Absolutely. Did you want to say anything additional about traffic and the conversation we had?
Going fine so far.
And lastly, you touched on it, the aesthetics, the view. It's specifically addressed in our comprehensive plan as far as the aesthetics and the small town feel looking west from I-25. And I think there's an opportunity here for, if this development gets approved, to utilize that as a way to enhance the view that we currently have, which is pretty bare. You see the homes.
Yeah.
Where in that process do we address it? Would it be specific to each individual plat as it comes forward as far as the architecture of that particular building? Does each individual one have landscaping requirements or criteria that we can address individually, or are we just broadly doing that tonight?
I think both. So we're trying to set some basic parameters tonight, basically setting minimums, right? Just to sort of kind of get things started and make sure, right, that's a baseline. But yes, as each one came in with a final PD site plan, we would be reviewing the exact architecture, right? And maybe you want to see something a little bit different based on where it sits on the site, or which side it fronts on, or whatnot. So both is where I'm going to leave that. Like I said, we're setting some standards, but we would address it even further.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
Water, is the water connection for this going to be with the town, or?
It'll actually be with TriView.
TriView.
Mm-hmm.
So TriView is going to be providing water
That's
in
correct.
this area?
Mm-hmm.
Gee, it sounds like we might be able to get emergency interconnect with them, huh? That's interesting.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Any additional questions from the board? Would the applicant like to present, please?
Good evening, trustees. My name is Andrea Barlow with NES. My name is Steve Shuck. I appreciate the opportunity to address you for just a moment to tell you that we've been developing property in the community for over 50 years, and I want to make certain that you are aware of our commitment to continue the quality of work we've done for that period of time. We're very proud of the developments we've done. We did Interquest at Mountain Shadows, at Prairies Park, Stratton Preserve, with the original partners in Woodmore, and we intend to give the same kind of make the same kind of commitment to making certain that Connexxus is up to the quality that you should have every reason to expect, and that is consistent with what we've been doing over the years. And finally, I'd like to make certain that you know that we are accessible, available anytime. If you have any questions, concerns, my name is in the phone book. We are available to you anytime. We intend to see this thing through to the very end. This is a total of 170 acres, of which this 23 is just the first phase. So we will be setting the stage for the quality that we expect to have permeate the entirety of the project. So if anything, this first stage will be an over-improvement because, again, it will set the tone for the balance. So we're committed. We look forward to working with your staff as we have been and with you all. And we are available at any time, answer any questions, respond to any issues you might have. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Okay, I'm going to actually give more information about the project itself. So I'm trying not to repeat too much of what Jennifer's already said, because I know there are a lot of people here, so I'm sure they all want to speak. Property located west of I-25, east of Old Denver Road. You've got the ice rink to the southwest and the Wagons West residential project immediately to the west. We've already spoken about what we're asking for. A bit of the zoning history. So this was originally zoned in the county as PID, and the whole area to the west of I-25 was identified as industrial use on the Gary Center and Melody Estate sketch plan, which was approved by El Paso County in 1981. The property was annexed into the town in 87 as Regency Park, and that was accompanied by the Regency Park sketch plan, which again showed the area to the west of I-25. A little star is approximately the location of the property. A couple of things I want to point out there. It's the scale's a bit difficult to read, but on the left-hand side where you see the access points, there are a total of 13 access points shown on this plan, including a loop road at the top and a loop road at the bottom. And in the area where the star is, that's actually the top end of the site, because you can vaguely see the two creeks crossing the side. So just to the north of the star is the Teach Out Creek, and to the south, a little further down, is the other creek. So that was actually divided into two parcels on this plan. One's about 8, actually almost 9 acres, and the other one was about the same. And they had 2 points of access into this property between the two creeks on the original plan. The town of Monument Ordinance confirmed that zoning. So when it was annexed in, it was confirmed as a PID zoning to identify the permitted uses. And the area continues to be zoned Regency Park PID on the zoning map. So that zoning is that kind of pinkish area. It extends from almost from Baptist Road, so the area just immediately at the intersection of Baptist and Old Denver Road is actually a commercial zoning, but from there north, pretty much all the way up to 2nd Street is industrial zoning for PID. I just wanted to kind of go over some of the policy documents that have come forward since this was zoned, and to try to give some understanding about how we've arrived at the land uses we're promoting now. So the 2003 comprehensive plan respected the existing zoning of the property for planned industrial and actually anticipated quite an intense industrial use for the site with uses that require shipping, deliveries by semi-trucks, light industrial, manufacturing, assembly, research and development uses. I left off the list mining because really not really appropriate for the site, but it was an approved use or recommended use. And then in 2012, the I-25 corridor plan was produced by the town. That started looking at this as being a little bit more of a campus-style business park with employment centres with supporting retail and commercial. And then to the plan that we have there, which is the current comprehensive plan, which Jennifer explained is a mixed-use designation, which we feel that in the context of the overall area is consistent with what we're proposing is consistent with that mixed-use designation of non-residential and residential uses together, which provides good services and employment opportunities for the area residents. So that's kind of that focused our evolution of the uses that we are looking at from purely industrial uses to more of a mix of uses. So this is the preliminary PD site plan. I put it in this orientation because it's just a little easier to read. I will later put it back to the north-south. But this shows, this is purely illustrative at this time. We are retaining the 2 drainage areas, which totals about 8 acres of open space. We have identified here 10 lots with 10 different shapes and sizes of buildings. Our anticipation is that these will probably mainly flex units, and that's where, for example, the 7,200 square foot unit on lot 5 would actually be individual bays that would be rented out for different types of uses. So there will be a number of different uses in these buildings, but it doesn't preclude one building being one use. So we anticipate a mix. As we've indicated, we are showing landscaping along I-25 boundary and also along the western boundary to Old Denver Road and the internal landscaping. In all cases, we've met or exceeded the town's requirements with our parameters, and specifically on the boundary adjacent to the trail, because the actual requirement is for landscaping adjacent to the arterial and Old Denver Road, and as we have that quite large trail track between the road and the property, we are not actually required to meet those landscape requirements because we don't have the adjacency to the road, but we provided that anyway, so we are actually exceeding the requirement. So I kind of already indicated, I put it back on its alignment now just because it mainly gives me more room to put some text on there, to be honest. So again, that kind of just explains what I've indicated. We'll have 1 point of access compared to the originally envisioned 2 points of access to this site. It just so happens, as you probably recall, that NES worked on the adjacent Wagons West property, and it was the same traffic consultant who looked at both properties, and they came along pretty much at the same time. So we were actually able to coordinate access. So the access points align, and the lane improvements that we're proposing are consistent with recommendations of the traffic report. I won't go into this too much detail because Jennifer already covered the parameters that we're looking at. I think the things to note are the restrictions on the retail use, and also there will be a cross-access agreement between the lots. So you can move from one lot to the other. You're not going to be restricted from just parking in one lot and not being able to go to another, so it would be a shared facility. Landscape setbacks, I've already emphasised the additional point I want to make about that we've kind of met or exceeded the standards here. And these are set on a lot by lot basis, so the question that was asked is when we come back with a final plan for a lot or 1 or 2 lots at a time, however it is, that these requirements will apply to each lot. Architectural design standards, we provided a couple of photographs to kind of illustrate some of the things we're looking at, so providing some interest to the buildings with some stucco or brick or stone. having some awnings at the entrances, earth tone material, colours and materials that will blend in with the area. I mean, ultimately they are going to be industrial commercial buildings, so they're not going to look residential, but we feel that we have developed standards which will make them look attractive and will blend into the developments in the area. So I just want to focus a little bit on what's approved now. So the PID zoning, maximum height limitation, as Jennifer said, it's a little vague. She says 90 feet. It kind of says 45 feet in another area, so I erred on the side of caution, but I think her 90 feet, having reviewed it, may be correct. And the setbacks are 50 feet from I-25 and 25 feet from the arterial streets. As I indicated, we're actually further from the arterial street because we've got the trail track between. Metal buildings are allowed in the PID zoning with exterior treatment subject to review. So we've taken that a step further. We're not excluding the possibility of metal buildings, but they will be required to have a high aesthetic. So they will not necessarily look like standard metal buildings. And the other uses, except for the ones mentioned there, will be required to be enclosed. Any outdoor uses will be in enclosed structures, and outdoor storage to be screened. So we've carried on those ideas into our standards. But I think the most significant thing that we've really honed down on, and that goes to the point I made about trying to respect the more recent policy documents, is the permitted uses. So the currently permitted uses are quite extensive: food processing, bottling and food processing. I mean, that can encompass a wide range of fairly heavy industrial uses. A manufacturing, processing, fabrication, assembly, motor freight terminal. Some of the other uses we actually would plan to carry on into our development, but outdoor storage, we are proposing it as an accessory use, so it would complement the existing uses there. Repair, rental and servicing. We think we've indicated that we've restricted auto repairs. We know how sensitive monuments are to auto repair facilities, so we kind of restricted those. The kennels, we've added those as an accessory use. So for example, this was a question that was brought up at Planning Commission. How would that work? And it would be like if there was a veterinary clinic there, that they would have an ancillary kennel facility. So if a pet had to stay overnight, then there would be some means of accommodating it, but it wouldn't be a full-scale kennel. So on that note, these are, like I say, the uses that we have restricted them. So a considerably shorter list, a little bit more mix of uses in there, and a lot less in terms of the in terms of the heavier industrial uses that could be allowed under the current PID. So that, I mean, obviously, if this application were to be denied tonight, then the option for the applicant would be, the landowner would be, to go with what's already allowed in the PID, because that's the approved uses. And that process then, because it is the Regency Park PID is considered a straight zoning, that would just go straight to site development plan. That's the process through the town, which actually by your code is an administrative approval process. I think more often than not it gets brought through Planning Commission and the board, but it is an administrative process. Trail crossing, as Jennifer noted, this was one of the hot topics at the neighbourhood meeting. So I just wanted to go through this in a bit more detail. It was approved in 2008 between El Paso County and Phoenix Bell Associates, who are the current landowners of the property, and the Shuck Corporation are contracted on this 23 acres, so that they're looking to move forward on this. And so really this initial 23 acres is going to set the tone for the rest of the development, and you know, whether something of more what we feel is more compatible and mixed use would be appropriate, or whether it's going to be the PID zoning which covers that entire area. The landowner dedicated some land for improvements to Baptist Road and the I-25 interchange, and also gave land for the trailhead at Baptist Road. And in exchange, the county agreed to provide 6 points of access to the across the trail to the development. Now, there was a question interestingly raised by one of the neighbours, where did we get from having 12, 13 points of access with the original sketch plan to then the county restricting it, having the ability to restrict it to 6. And I think what I have worked on in the meantime to establish is I've spoken to the county and we've looked at some past aerial photographs, is that the trail was actually constructed late 80s, early 90s. So that was the change in circumstances. I think it was anticipated at that time because it was the old railroad right-of-way, but it was actually constructed after the original sketch plan was approved. So I think once it was there, the county became a little bit more cognizant of the fact that they needed to maybe limit the number of trail crossings. And so that was part of the agreement with the developer. And that agreement for the 6 crossings extends that entire, from Baptist Road all the way almost up to 2nd Street. There's one other parcel owned by somebody else on the 2nd Street Beacon Light, or 2nd Street Old Denver Road, south-east corner. But that's 6 total points of access along that whole length of Old Denver Road. And also as part of that agreement, cost of constructing and maintaining the crossings was down to the developers. Constructing and maintaining and directing any signs, signalization, and so on was all at the cost of the developer and to the standards and specifications of the county. So we've had some discussions with the county. We prepared this plan, more detailed plan of how the trail crossing would look, and actually this is the final iteration of it. We put forward something, they made some comments, we changed it, and we went backwards and forwards a couple of times. So we're proposing a ramp crossing, we're proposing actually a sidewalk connection into the property. We're not at this point proposing a sidewalk connection to Old Denver Road, but bearing in mind some of the conditions that were imposed on Wagons West to the west to provide a pedestrian crossing across Old Denver Road, that may, we didn't initially do that because there's nothing really to connect to, there's no sidewalk there. So I would say that's possibly still open for discussion depending on how we end up with that crosswalk. But the county staff have reviewed it and they have asked, the only really additional thing that they asked for that we have to get approved is signage, and they've suggested a passive or push button activated blinker sign. It hasn't really been resolved what that is going to be. We have to submit plans. I know that representatives of the Trail and Open Space Coalition, they have kind of got involved in this, and I know their preference is for more of a passive sign than a push button, so people don't have to stop and push a button to be able to cross the street. So I mean, we're willing to work with the county on whatever that sign needs to be, and to ensure that it's safe and appropriate for trail users. So a little bit of traffic. Old Denver Road is a minor arterial. I think sometimes that's maybe not appreciated because it really doesn't have much development on it at the moment. It is posted speed of 40 miles per hour. And it's operating at approximately 50% of its capacity right now, based on the traffic studies. And what we're proposing here would add approximately this project and Wagons West about 14% increase from both developments based on the 2040, the magic year design traffic. And we are incorporating all the changes that were proposed: a northbound right turn deceleration lane into the Connexxus site, a southbound left turn lane into Connexxus, and then that 3-lane section that Jennifer was referring to, by the requirements of the southbound left turn taper, that would have tapered in again just to go back to a 3-lane section for the northbound left turn into Wagon Gap Trail. So instead of having that taper down and taper back up again, we decided just to keep it a 3-lane section for that entire stretch. And then obviously a northbound left turn lane was previously approved with the Wagons Gap project, Wagons West project, sorry. Utilities, the questions were asked about water, they will be provided by TriView. The property lies over the non-tributary Larry Fox Hill Aquifer, so for any of the not non-tributary requirements, Triview charges a fee of $17,000 per acre, and I'll let you do the math at 23 acres. That's a very substantial a fee that will have to be paid to Triview. The water line is currently stubbed under the highway just north of the dam of Shamrock, which is, I think you know where that is, on the kind of just by Baptist and I-25, and that line will be extended north by Triview to serve the property. Sanitary sewer is also in that general area, and that's going to be extended again north, and then it will actually then be extended by Triview underneath the highway by this site to get across to the other side of the highway to serve some of the development on that side of the highway as well. And then Black Hills will provide gas, and MBA will provide electric, and there's existing services that are adjacent to the site, either on the west side or the east side of Old Denver Road. And I think with that, hopefully I've answered all your questions, but if you have any additional, please do not hesitate to ask.
Additional questions from the board?
Yes, I noticed on the proposed uses, one of the changes was you dropped laboratories but kept research facilities. What kind of research are they going to, does that permit?
Well, I think it goes to the point of where we got into quite a detailed discussion as a planning commission how broad the categories, and Trustee Koopman raised this point. I mean, a research facility, it's not limited to whatever would be defined as research. I mean, we're not specifying that it's going to be, I'm not even sure that we're specifically anticipating a research facility here, but we thought it was a positive use that could have positive job creation and positive benefits for monuments, so it wasn't something we wanted to exclude. But what type of research facility, it could be anything that falls within that category. And just to kind of piggyback on the conversation about the broadness of the categories, they are the same as they has been included in other zonings in the town and specific categories. And the place to define those categories is in the code, not by each development one by one. So I think staff recognises the code is maybe a little deficient in defining those categories, whereas some other codes, different municipalities would provide a whole definition section that includes those. That would be the appropriate place to define the categories.
But you specifically did delete laboratories, right? It wasn't on there.
No, it wasn't on there, no.
I just was wondering why.
I mean, I think more because I felt it an unnecessary addition, whereas I would have thought research would include a laboratory, so it could. So I just felt it was an unnecessary additional clarification of that use, and we were specifically asked by staff to try and simplify the use categories.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
Okay.
You're right, there is a wide variety of research.
Yeah.
That's not going to work. I appreciate the fact that they're on the list. It was shortened from the previous list. And secondly, I see the professional administrative offices. Is there the potential for any section of this business park to include Class A office condos?
Sure.
Yeah. That would fall under that category.
We have a shortage in monument.
Additional questions?
One more. What do you envision your signage for entry and or I-25 corridor?
Well, that hasn't been designed yet. We put placeholders on the preliminary plan to identify potential locations. So I think we're showing I don't think this has a cursor, but you might be able to see in that top corner there, it's identified as a sign easement, so just a location there for a sign adjacent. That would be visible from I-25, and then one close to the entrance, so that kind of pale grey, yellowy colour would be the location of the sign. I don't have a pointer, but just to the left of the entrance.
We're just talking like a monument sign or something.
Yes,
like that.
That's right. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
90-foot sign.
This is a public hearing, so I will now open it up to the public. Would anybody like to speak against this project, or ordinance 0052018? Ms. Heisel.
Come on down.
Hi.
could take a moment to sign in, please.
I will do that. I didn't really know whether to come up with the against or the for, because I'm not 100% against it. The concerns I have are, I was very involved, not very involved, somewhat citizen involved with the comprehensive plan thing. I went to this, I did the surveys, I came to some of the workshops, gave ideas and comments, and I specifically had concerns about this development along Old Denver Road because I live at the corner of Wagon Gap Trail and Old Denver Road. So this will be right in my backyard for the most part. I came to the realization that we're not going to be able to have cows on it forever, which we all love, or most of us do, because the owner wants to sell, and I get that. I'm not trying to say that he can't or anything like that and prohibit that or whatever, but my concern is that on the future development zoning was mixed use. It didn't mention anything about any kind of industrial or warehousing. And so, you know, on the proposed change here, which I don't think is a bad thing to do because it does limit what it could be right now, which I'm in favor of. I'm just concerned about that being included in there because I don't know what that means for like light industrial. What's going to be in my backyard with that? And I was at the planning commission meeting, but I couldn't stay for the whole thing, so I never really got to hear more about that piece. I had to take my son home, put him to bed because they had school the next day. Because that one went late. So that's my biggest concern is that. I wanted to take that into consideration. And I don't know if that's something that they can tweak slightly, or you can request them to, or if you even care about that. But that was my biggest thing on that. I know things are going to go in. I saw the pictures of the possibilities of what the buildings could look like. I think they look nice. I don't think it's a terrible idea. I was a little concerned because the rumors were floating around and I heard it was going to be 6 crossings between my house and the trailhead. And I'm like, oh my goodness, we're going to have like, and there was going to be like trucks coming through all hours of the night. And I was just like, what? So anyway, that's all I had to say. I just was concerned about that and wanted you to take that into consideration, please.
Thank you, Ms. Idle. Is there anyone else who would like to speak against this ordinance? Seeing none, I'll open it for anybody who would like to speak for.
Terry Hayes, Village Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development Corporation. As you know, we've had a great boom in residential building these past 5 years or so. What follows homes, commercial development. That's just a natural way things happen. We're seeing it from a consumer standpoint. Obviously, we've had a huge growth in retail and restaurants, and as we know, tire stores, mostly in the Jackson Creek area. But what the next area of commercial development we need actually has to do with jobs. We're a bedroom community where a good portion of our residents commute north and south. Sometimes have spouses, one heads north and one heads south, so we're a great area for that. But what we also hear is residents after a certain amount of years get really tired of their commute. The other thing they deal with is as they have kids, and as when their kids are little, they drop them off at daycare, not a problem. But when the kids start getting older and they start getting involved in sports and they start getting involved in more activities after school, it's really hard for someone who works in Denver to get down very frequently to a play at 4 o'clock in the afternoon or to see a game. So what we are seeing a lot is people are contracting more now. They're starting to want to live and work in the same area and not have those big commutes. It just helps create a better community that way. But unless we have jobs that are other than retail and restaurants in this community, they're not going to have a place to go. They need to have a solution of where they can go. If they don't, they're either going to pack up and leave and go move closer to where they work, which we don't want to lose them as residents. So I think that is one of the reasons why we're definitely for this. This proposed business park on this particular property is really the best use for this. The developer has made a commitment to the aesthetics being very pleasing with nice finishes and appropriate landscaping. I personally think the landscaping alone is going to add noise control. It is going to enhance the view, and Greg, you're right, I actually think it could increase. One of the comments we had from residents, Jennifer and I had a meeting with a couple of residents, and she said right now we have a view of Walmart. Well, I think it would be much better to have a view of a line of trees and then a nicer building behind those trees than the bright lights that happen at Jackson Creek across the freeway. A couple of months, this developer did something that he was not required to. He held a public meeting where we had over 70 local residents attend. They answered questions, they listened to the concerns. Some they have no control over, like Santa Fe Trail, that's been beat to death quite a bit. But other things they do, and they have taken things into consideration, the comments that those residents had. That meeting showed me, and I think should show you guys, that we have a developer that cares about what's going into this community. He could just put up anything allowed within the zoning. Jennifer's already talked about what is currently zoned, and what this developer is willing to do is improve upon what currently is in this area. He has developed many properties. He is not going to put up something that he is not proud of and that he is not going to show other people, look what I did in this community, look how wonderful it was accepted, it integrated into the community well. The Connexxus Business Park is a good fit for this piece of property, the location in the community, and the Tri-Lakes Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development Corporation is definitely for this project, and we hope you agree.
Before you
Thank
get
you,
up,
Ms.
Terry,
Hayes.
would you mind signing this?
Is there anyone else that would like to speak for this? Seeing none, I'll close the public comments and bring it back to the board.
I have a comment. I just want to say thank you. I appreciate the dialogue and the involvement.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? Would you just mind asking if the applicant wants to speak again?
Sorry.
Okay. Do you have anything to add?
Thank you, sorry. I've done it twice to you, and of course you don't want to say anything.
I was saying appreciation. I appreciate the involvement. I also appreciate Ms. Hayes. I had a conversation with her last year about what role she and her organization could play in kind of bridging the gap between the planning process and engaging the community in that process. And I think this was probably the first full-fledged example of what could happen when you kind of engage the community for their input hand in hand with the developers. I just want to say thank you for what you did with this particular project, and with the developer, there's some very valid concerns as a resident right there, my backyard as well. Safety with that crossing on Santa Fe Trail, traffic, as well as the aesthetics are going to be very important to the current residents of this town, and that's something that I hope you stay engaged and mindful of if this were to get passed. Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Anybody would like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance number 05-2018, an ordinance approving a rezoning and preliminary PD site plan for the Connexxus Business Park.
Ms. Hogan?
Trustee Elliott.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilson.
Yes.
Trustee Bornstein.
Yes.
Trustee Medlicott.
Yes.
Trustee Murphy.
Yes.
Trustee Goodman.
Yes.
Motion passed 6-0. We now have a motion to set a public hearing on the petition for modification of service plan filed by Village Center Metropolitan District. Alicia?
A service plan amendment, petition for a service plan amendment has been filed. This is similar to one that you considered last year, so the same process has to be followed where notice has to be sent out. We have to do it between 20 and 30 days. So it wouldn't be sufficient time for you to set the public hearing for the very next Board of Trustees meeting. So I'm asking that you set it for March 5th so that the district has time to send out the requisite notice.
Any discussion on March 5th? For or against? Looks like March.
Do an action motion to set the public hearing on petition to modification of the service plan filed by the Village Center Metro District for March 5th.
Second.
Thank you.
Trustee Bornstein.
Yes.
Trustee Medlicott.
Yes.
Trustee Elliott.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilson.
Yes.
Trustee Goodman.
Yes.
Trustee Murphy.
Yes.
This takes us to the public comments portion of our meeting. Per municipal code 2.04.030 J2B, Public comments shall be limited to 3 minutes.
And if you wouldn't mind signing in, please.
I will, thank you. Before I make my comments this evening, I want to bring the board's attention to some somber news that I received while we're sitting here. I'm not sure if you're aware, but 3 officers were involved in a shooting in Colorado Springs, and one of those officers had passed away. And I would ask Mayor Pro Tem to suspend the time and give a moment of silence to Officer Fleck, Deputy Fleck, who was survived by a spouse and 7-year-old twins.
Can we just suspend the time for 1 minute? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. My name is Aaron Jensen. I'm an attorney. I'm the managing partner of the law firm Jensen & Laney. I am here on behalf of all of the officers except for one who was sick, of the Monument Police Department. I'm also here on behalf of every single one of the other employees except for 2 who I also was unable to meet with. The reason why I came in here is because I respectfully request an executive session to address a very sensitive HR and personnel issue raised in the memorandum provided to you by Chief Shirk, dated February 1st, 2018. The purpose of the executive session would not be to go to the merits of that memorandum, and that's extremely important. What I would ask an executive session for is to address an opportunity to create a barrier for the management supervision by the city manager to allow the police department to be able to do their job. And I'm here on behalf of them to tell you that they are fearful of retaliation. They're concerned about some of the comments and actions that have been taken by the city manager, and they're not able to do their job. And so I ask for one of you to move for a motion to be able to have an executive session to be able to address that issue. And all of those individuals are here tonight, and they've been sitting here the entire time to show their support on their dime. And so I would ask that one of you make a motion so that we can have an executive session, allow them to participate, and show you the import of what's going on. They cannot do their job very effectively right now with the fear of retaliation. Odd that he's gone. The fear of retaliation coming from the city manager. And if you're not clear, he is the direct supervisor and manager over the police department. So I respectfully request one of you make that motion.
Motion to amend agenda in the middle of our current meeting to include the addition of this executive session.
Second.
For what purpose? Just clear for the record.
I will say personnel matters.
Okay, regarding which employee?
It appears to be the town manager.
Okay, so that is on the agenda already for an executive session tonight.
It
So
appears
you want to
we don't know
include-
what that one was about. This has a specific requirement. So I would say,
If I may, Trustee Koopman, it would be maybe the topic to discuss the temporary removal of supervision by the city manager over the police department and institute an emergency supervisory board, either constituted by the entire trustee or a portion of them, to oversee the police department during the pending investigation of the allegations against the town manager.
so I would like to make a motion for
clarify
that.
real quick? Do we have a memorandum? You mentioned a memorandum?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I
I'm happy
was
to
in
provide
receipt
you
of
with
that.
one if you've not received it.
I did not receive it.
Okay.
I believe the one that I received had every trustee included on it.
I will go make copies right now and provide them again, but I'm happy to highlight those issues
So
again.
how many have not received that?
I haven't seen it.
Who was it sent by?
It was sent by the chief.
Okay, I always get your emails, so I don't know why I didn't receive that.
I found mine in my junk box.
I check my junk mail all the time.
I sent it to every single board member along with HR.
It was in
Twice.
Daily Digest where it was caught, and you need to release it into your inbox.
So we already have an executive session.
We have an executive session tonight to discuss a personnel matter regarding the town manager. So what he's asking is to have a second executive session with all of the police department employees
Yes.
and his attorney.
And I would ask that that occurs first, because again, this is not going to the merits of the memorandum, which apparently has not been read. This goes to the need to institute an emergency suspension of the management of the city, of the town manager of the police department.
A question on that with that, because that would be our third executive session, because we have one prior, but I'm gonna make the assumption, because yourself, the town attorney, represents the board.
Correct.
And the town doesn't represent individuals, so to
Correct.
speak, so that would be yourself, the board.
Now, the employee that you're speaking about has a right to attend that executive session, and if he does not want you to have it, that personnel matter discussion in executive session, he can demand that it be done in an open meeting.
That would be the first one that we added on. Is that correct?
Well, if, my understanding is this would also involve the town manager, so he would have that same right where he could say, yes, that's fine, we can do it in executive session, or he would say, no, I want to do it in an open meeting.
I would be against allowing everybody to speak in an executive session that we have not seen the memorandum on.
I'm not informed at all as to what is happening.
And if I can just speak up, that's something that I discussed with Mr. Jensen, is that the chief related that he had sent this memorandum to the entire board, and that I had spoken with a couple of you who said they had not received it, and also with HR. So I made copies to bring that tonight and just discuss that personnel matter with you. But I wanted the opportunity to discuss that with you, and I thought that would be more appropriate. And that if there was something in particular he wanted me to relay during executive session. But he has chosen to come speak during public comment, which he is totally allowed to do so.
With all due respect, you don't need to know the contents of the memorandum back and forth in order to have a good and comprehensive discussion about the emergency motion that we're proposing. We can certainly give you the highlights, if you'd like, of that memorandum. But the issue as we stand now, I'm not sure if you're aware. If you're not aware about the memorandam, are you aware that Chief Shirk has been placed on administrative leave?
So your time is done.
After the memorandum. Well, I asked Chief, may I have your 3 minutes?
With my permission, yes.
Okay, there's another 3 minutes. And all I can get the rest of my clients to give me their 3 minutes. So
A lot of time has expired.
I just have one question, with multiple trustees not seeing the memo and having good information, possibly to move forward. And if there's something to diffuse it, obviously. It's not gonna fix anything right now, but maybe to give a 10-minute, 15-minute and let everybody read what we're talking about, even though it doesn't have to be discussed, so to speak. So.
I personally would like to do what I originally proposed at the start of the meeting, and that is to have an executive session with the board and see this memo and discuss what issues are at hand. I don't believe that we're informed enough right now to have an emergency anything. I feel pressured.
I'm just gonna make a comment. I don't feel that the board is being represented 100% effectively, and you might be representing the town manager. So I want some other input.
Oh, yeah, that's totally fine if
Right.
you choose to have, that is up to you, completely, if you would like to amend the agenda.
I just worry when I hear
executive
emails
session.
were sent and I haven't received anything.
That's right, and that was my question today. So I wasn't told about this until today, which is why I asked to add it to the agenda. So as soon as I found out that I could discuss it with all of you and how to handle it.
Right.
And I think that would be something more appropriate to be done in executive session than to continue discussing it here. So right now, you need to make a decision as to whether you would like to proceed with the executive session that we have scheduled, and then you can come out and take further action if you would like, or if you want to amend the agenda to allow a second executive session with this group of people.
So we can, to clarify what you're saying, is we can have the executive session as previously suggested and voted and approved by Trustee Elliott, come back And at that point, should we deem it necessary to even hold another executive session, amend the agenda at that point to add an additional one?
That's correct, because you can't take any action in executive session, so you would have to come out into an open meeting to do that if you wanted to.
All members of the police department will be waiting to see what your decision is.
We're still in public comment?
Yes.
And again, a polite reminder, please sign in.
My name is Lance Farr. I'll be very brief for you. I'm here on kind of a related matter, but in a little maybe different, apparently I can't write my address and speak at the same time very well. A little bit different matter. I'm a retired San Diego police officer. I was a narcotics and satanic crimes expert. I work special details with the Honorable Mayor Maureen O'Connor, and I trained officers. The reason I bring that up is I have a certain level of expertise and experience on a department like that that is pretty uncommon, to be honest with you. I've trained throughout the western United States on different departments, including in Colorado, helping them with various needs that I have the expertise of. What I want to say is a police chief can be judged really simply, and that's by the conduct and the professionalism of his officers. I don't care if it's a 6,000 member police department like San Diego, or a 25,000 member police department like New York, or a small department like Monument. I've interacted with the police officers without them knowing who I am or what my background was, because I don't always stop real well for stop signs. It's kind of a California habit. I've been pulled over in my own neighborhood for that. And by far, these officers are extraordinary. They're polite, they're professional, their training is amazing. I watch them in my mirrors. I watch their behaviors. I watch them how they approach a car. I watch them how they talk to people, where they stand. To the nth detail. I lost 2 partners. And anytime I see a police officer screw up, I don't care who they are. I don't care if they write me a ticket or not. I educate them right on the spot. And I stand them down, because I don't want to see another police officer die like happened tonight. Chief Shirk is an amazing chief of police. He is absolutely amazing. You'd be foolish to lose this man in his position. It would be a fool's errand, and it would not serve the town of Monument to lose him. You know what you have. You don't know what you'll get. I am asking you, whatever your executive meetings are and whatever your technical decisions have to be, think of me, think of my family, think of your children. Keep this police department intact. I beg you. It's one of the reasons we moved to Monument. Please make judgment, a good judgment. That's what makes a good cop. That's what makes a good public servant, is judgment, not written letter law. Apparently I did use my 3 minutes. Thank you so much, and thank you for what you do for our town.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, trustees. Boy, you got a lot on your plate. I wanted to thank you for the resolution that we can do a public hearing for March 5th, coming back to Village Center Metro in the midst of everything else. Last time I was here a couple months ago, I was very discouraged, felt like my back was against the wall and representing the residents there at Village Center. When Trustee Murphy suggested, hey, if you revisited staff, we did. And I just wanted to tell you that I've been very encouraged in the last 2 months, so I wanted to just give a little bit of a positive report. I wanted to thank you in advance. It looks like part of your executive session is reviewing what our attorney and Alicia have worked on. And I just wanted to tell you that when I walked into Chris's office after the last meeting, there was just an instant aura of a win-win reconciliation. Let's make this work. Let's make this happen. Let's bring this division into unity. And I just wanted to pass that along. So working with him was great. Alicia's been great. Tom Tharnish has been great. And I look forward to March 5th and answering any questions you have. I know that I just came from a big meeting where we had 100 people over at the Lutheran Church going over with the residents what's happening and everything, and they asked how they could help, and they wanted to know how to reach out to you guys. So you may get some emails from our residents in support of this resolution. So I'm just letting you know to be ready for that, or maybe any phone call saying, hey, please get this passed, okay? And we'll probably have a few people here at the next meeting as well. But if any of you need to reach out to me individually, have any questions or concerns about it, please feel free to over the next month. And I look forward to March 5th, okay? Thank you, and thank you for your stuff.
Thank you. Additional public comments?
Yeah, I do. I really didn't know I was coming here. You can start the clock. I really didn't know I was coming here because I come to these meetings a lot. I get to hear the sales pitch from chamber comments about why we need to grow. I get to hear developers and contractors about how we're going to develop Monument because they're all making money from it. Now I know I'm here because of what I just witnessed. As a community member, I'm kind of embarrassed that we're even doing this. But I can tell you, Mr. Lowe, you embarrassed me publicly when I brought up the thing about a drone at my first meeting here. Your lawyer, who was a clown that sat to your right, embarrassed me in front of the public when I came to my first meeting. I've seen you embarrass and humiliate your members up here in front of me when they try to do a job, and they're doing it not out of a paycheck because they're interested and concerned about our community. So I'm very disturbed that I'm hearing that our chief of police and our police officers that defend this community, the backbone of what we got going on here, is even in this situation. It's an embarrassment. And you are the paid leader of this community. And if you can't lead us, and you can't take care of us, then how do we get a paid official out of their position? That is my question to the board, because there's got to be a way to do it. Because he embarrassed me in front of this community, and I thought I forgave him, and as a Christian I should have forgave him, but I'm using this as an example that it's a problem. It is a problem, it's a systemic problem, it's a cancerous problem. And if we don't fix it, we're not going to lead the community, and we're not going to take care of our police officers. So, how do we get that guy accounted for? That's my question. And I'm not politically correct. I would never sit behind that thing. I'm not governmental speaking. I couldn't sit behind there, and I know it, and I'll never do it. And if he can't, he shouldn't be sitting behind there either, especially getting a paycheck. That's why I'm here, and I'll be the voice of the community and the loudmouth and the guy that gets on Next Door Neighbor and Facebook and say what has to be said, because I'm not politically correct. But the people that get paid to be politically correct need to be professional and be politically correct and treat people with dignity and respect. That's what I have to say.
Excuse me, what was your name, please?
Joseph Whitman.
Thank you.
I'm afraid to give my address because I don't want to.
I have a drum will find
Yeah.
Any additional public?
That's exactly what I mean. That's exactly what I mean.
Thank you,
Paid
Joe.
manager had to make that comment. Don't arrest me.
Good evening, trustees. So you've heard from community members, now you're going to hear from a wife. Who says goodbye to their spouse every single day, not knowing if they're coming home? Who makes double the income that he does, sitting in an office? That's me. This has tore me up. I haven't slept. I've lost 10 pounds. And I can't say that it's been easy on anybody else either. Please consider the fact of what is going on in our community before we lose every single one of these brothers in blue and we have nobody. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, ma'am. Additional public comments?
This may take a minute. Pleasure to be here. I've been involved in a lot of these types of meetings over the years. Been doing this for, 50+ years. And so I've seen a lot of communities. I've seen a lot of people, seen a lot of good people. I'm here to support Chief Shirk. I know him personally. He's a good man, he's an honest man, he has integrity. That's the type of man you want. That's the type of man I want in my police department, as my police chief. I look at various organizations, I look at the city of Monument or whatever, the police chief, and I can tell what the leader is like by what their subordinates are like. Invariably I can, talk with a worker and know what the chief or what the leader is like. And I do it all the time. You've got a good leader. I don't know the officers, but I know you have a good leader. And I just wanted to make my voice heard to you and ask you guys to do the right thing. I don't know what's going to happen. Please do the right thing.
Thank you, sir.
What was your name, sir?
My name is Don Billings. Recently have moved to Monument in the last year. Retired. Got a lot of experience. A lot of city experience, too.
Thank you, Mr. Billings.
Any other public comments?
My name is Greg Fell. I am a resident of Monument. I'm a former police officer in the city of Monument. I've worked for 5 different law enforcement agencies. I came to you from El Paso County. I served as a deputy there for 11.5 years. And I left under Sheriff Makita in 2008. If you've been around, you know what was happening back at that time. I left there because of fear of retaliation. Many others in that department also left. Some stayed. Many got fired. I came to the town of Monument and found that of the 5 agencies I've worked with, this one has the best morale. It has the strongest training. It has the best management. The officers who work here don't work here for the money, you know that. They are here because of the climate in which they're working. My brothers and sister behind me are all fearful right now. All that our attorney has asked, and by the way, it's come to the point where every officer has had to hire an attorney in your town.
All that we are asking tonight is for an executive session to separate Chris Lowe as the manager of the police department and have a temporary management. Could you please have a motion and a second to do that? I heard motion and a second, and it was never followed through.
Thank you, Mr. Foe. Any additional comments?
Mayor Pro Tem, I'm not a member of the city. I live in the county. Can I still comment?
Yes.
Thank you. My name is John Bird. Thank you. And just live up the hill a little here. And I guess I'll say I didn't know what to expect when I came tonight. And I don't know that I was planning on really speaking up, but I first want to thank you for your service, but I really want to direct my comments to these officers here in this room and Chief Shirk. I am grateful for your service. And I don't know everything that's going on here, but it scares me to think that you're not getting the support from the city that you deserve. And I struggle. I struggle with that. These first responders, they need all of our support. And this poor wife, not knowing if they're going to come home. And lately there's been too many officers in our community around here that have not come home. So please support them. Thank you.
Additional public comments? Seeing none, I will close the public comment section. We'll move on to board authorizations.
Mayor Pro Tem, point of order, I believe there was a motion and a second and not any vote taken.
I'm sorry.
Was there a motion?
Not.
I mean, I know there was a motion.
I did make a motion and there was a second
Yeah.
for an executive session specific to addressing a temporary interim management structure specifically for the police department. I don't know what you would put that under. If it's not under anything, then I think it's a conversation that needs to be had in public. I would prefer an executive session for legal advice, so if anything, for specific legal advice. So let's revise it to that. Let's say motion for a amended agenda to include a secondary executive session to discuss specifically as presented, and I would do this after ours, and if we find that it's not warranted, then we can do, cancel the second one, but to address specifically temporary or interim management of specifically our police department until we can get to the bottom of exactly what's going on.
You're looking at me.
Oh, he made a motion.
That's my amended motion.
Okay, no.
This is how we got here.
I'll second, but then I have a question when we're
Sure.
done here. Thank you.
Clarification, are we?
So basically, it sounds like this is a possible motion or a possible executive session after our executive session.
I think you had originally discussed that you would consider that after we went into
Exactly.
executive session and had an opportunity to talk, but my understanding now is that Greg is asking to amend that and put that on the agenda now.
Okay.
So that's the motion before you.
And if I could just make a comment.
Sure.
I don't know what's behind, but when we hear at a meeting that somebody's on administrative leave, I don't like to get surprises up here.
We have a
got
motion.
Big
Can
agenda.
we take care of the motion first? Right?
Sure.
Okay. Ms. Hogan?
Trustee Borstein?
Yes.
Trustee Coogan?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Medlicott?
Yes.
Trustee Elliott?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
So now
Board authorization.
Did you want to finish your comment?
Yeah, I would like to ask a question, because again, we have a fun thing called Cora, so anything we don't want to talk about is fully available if an email was sent.
Why is the chief on administrative leave? And I want to know from my colleagues here and everybody in this room.
That's not something that I did, but that is something that we can definitely talk about, and I intended to talk about tonight when we go into executive
But,
session.
but I want to know, I'm not asking for, I'm just asking why. Can somebody,
Like
I just don't like getting.
But
My
does that,
decision that I made.
does that bring it to a
So,
public hearing about discipline?
right. Point of order. We're at board authorization items. Let's just push through this. Let's go through
I'm
the
gonna come
agenda.
right back when we get to comments. I'm coming right back.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
This is a public document, so do we leave it here for everybody to, I mean,
Board
I'm just
authorization.
asking a question.
Board authorization items. Do we have any? Ms. Hogan?
I have one. It's a follow-up. I know we had the Planning 101. Second part of that was a roundtable community discussion on, you know, we obviously can't say no to businesses just because they're a Burger King or a Starbucks or whatever. The initial intent was Planning 101, but also how do we utilize things like overlays and special district zones and things like that to accomplish more of the vision that the community illustrated in the surveys for the comprehensive plan. So I just wanted to follow up to see, do we have a timeline of when we're going to get that on the calendar, or can we?
I've spoken to a land use attorney who is willing to come speak to you as a board to just maybe kind of address those things broadly, so that you can then decide what you want to do, if you want to do a code rewrite or how you want to handle it from there. And he said he would come and talk to you. He is attorney for 4 different municipalities, so time-wise is gonna, I think we're gonna have to be a little bit more accommodating of him if that's possible. So I can work on dates and maybe get Laura to email them to y'all, and we can set a date for that.
Yeah, and I'm not in a, you know, definite rush. I just wanted to follow up and make sure we are forward momentum next. So.
Yeah, his name is Jerry Dahl, and he's been doing land use for a very long time, and he was more than willing to come down and talk to you about it.
Great, thank you.
Any other board authorizations?
Just a question, are we anticipating Triview coming to update us on what they're doing? We talked a lot tonight about them approving, like we will serve for water, but my concern is the infrastructure. They're becoming strictly a water company while the roads fall apart on the east side of our town. So can we invite them again with their strategy?
Me or Chris? I'm sorry.
Chris?
Anybody?
Jim Brady's got a phone number.
Chris, Mr. Bishop, will you invite Triview to our next meeting if they would like to just come and give an update on anything?
So our HR person is now the liaison when the board has.
I'll be happy to do it. I wasn't sure if you were speaking to me.
Just trying to understand the protocol.
Yeah, because
Just
normally.
trying to understand.
But I'll be happy to if you want me to do it.
Any other board authorizations? Okay. Board of Trustee comments?
Yeah, do you want to do the report?
Oh, I'm sorry. Town manager report, Mr. Lowe?
Nothing.
Okay, nothing there. Board of Trustee comments?
Thank you, Terry Hayes, for doing a great job with the Tri-Lakes State of the Region luncheon. That was very informative. And you're a great speaker.
Any other board comments? Seeing none, Ms. Corley, will you take us into executive session?
Recommend an executive session pursuant to Colorado